Okay, welcome everybody to the November 2023 meeting of Manhattan Community Board One's Land Use Zoning and Economic Development Committee. I'm Patrick Cannell, Chair of the committee. Tammy Meltzer, Chair of CB1, is here. Zach Palmer, our new district manager, is with us, and we're ready to begin with the first item on our agenda, which is just a non-voting item, but nevertheless a very important informational item from our friends at the Downtown Alliance, their quarterly update on all things happening downtown. So turn it over to Josh Nakowitz, who's SVP of Economic Development of the Downtown Alliance, and Samantha Prado, who's Chief of Staff of the Downtown Alliance.
Thank you for that introduction, Patrick. Where do you want me to stand?
Wherever you want.
You can actually sit at the table as long as you're near a camera. How's that?
Cool.
Let me.
We do the representation
Yep. I'm in for it.
up here.
Just need one
I
second.
sat in one seat, they were all wires. I'm wired.
Great.
That far?
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you for the introduction, Patrick. As Patrick said, I'm Josh Nakowitz. I'm our SVP for Economic Development of the Downtown Alliance. I'm going to give you a quick overview of what we're seeing with the real estate market in Lower Manhattan. We just released our third quarterly report about 2 weeks ago. So all of this information is pretty much up to date as to the third quarter. We can move on to the next two slides, actually. Next one there. Thanks, Tammy. So we'll start off with the office market, which continues to be extraordinarily challenged in Lower Manhattan. We saw about 620,000 square feet of leasing in the third quarter. That is a substantial drop off from the million plus square feet of leasing that the market saw in the second quarter. That being said, it's important to keep in mind that that second quarter leasing total was driven largely by one very large city government lease. ACS, the Administration for Children's Services, took about 650,000 square feet in the second quarter at 110 William Street. So the leasing pattern really sort of in the third quarter returned back to closer to the sort of pandemic norm that we've seen since the middle of 2020. Our vacancy rates in the district are still very, very high. And our leasing is unfortunately still lagging leasing that we've been seeing in the other Manhattan submarkets. The next slide. Yes, thank you. And again, vacancy rates are down slightly from the second quarter, but are still stubbornly high and are still at near record highs in Lower Manhattan. And I think most troublingly that we see here on this chart, the breakdown between Class A, Class B, and Class C vacancy rates, that the Class B rates are really soaring. And we see certain parts of the market in Lower Manhattan, particularly in the center of the financial district, with older Class B buildings where vacancy rates are approaching, if not exceeding, 30%. We can go on to the next slide. So the office market, again, continues to be really challenged downtown. The residential market is a real counterpoint to that and has continued to show a lot of resiliency and a lot of strength downtown. We had a very busy summer leasing season downtown. Median apartment rents have risen to a stunning $4,768. It's a 6% increase quarter over quarter. And our rents are trending substantially higher than they are in the residential market in Manhattan overall. So the residential market still continues to be very, very strong downtown. Condo sale prices have continued to also be fairly strong. We've seen one new residential building open up in the last quarter at One Park Row, which is bringing another 58 units of residential product onto the market in Lower Manhattan. And I think the real takeaway here is that the neighborhood's residential growth has been so strong and so robust. I think Lower Manhattan has moved from, in the last 5-10 years, from being a sort of an alternative to some other neighborhoods with similar sorts of residential property in the city, to becoming more and more a neighborhood choice that people are looking at as a first choice to either rent or buy.
Excellent.
Move on to the next slide. So briefly talk a little bit about residential conversions. This is similar to what we talked about the last time we were at the committee. We haven't seen any new residential conversions announced since the second quarter. We're still tracking 5 buildings, 5 major office properties downtown that are either planning to convert or in the process of converting. 4 New York Plaza that you see here, 25 Water Street, which will be the largest office to residential conversion anywhere in the United States. A little bit over 1,300 units of rental housing, and if you walk down Water Street today, they're well in the progress of doing that and refenestrating the entire building. It'll be quite an impressive project. It's completed.
Is that rental or co-op or condo?
4 New York Plaza will be all rental.
Do you know if there's affordability in there?
There's not.
Zero affordable housing.
There's not.
Yes.
So in the next several years, we are looking at about 1,240 new units that are going to be added into the residential mix in Lower Manhattan, as well as 4 New York Plaza and 55 Broad Street. 160 Water is also converting, as well as 17 Battery and 90 John Street are planning on conversions. And there are a few other buildings that I know that I'm not going to get into tonight that are rumored and are probably will show up in that conversion pipeline, I imagine, in the next 6 months. Another 3 to 4 buildings downtown that we're tracking currently that are very likely to eventually convert.
Apologies.
And we can move on to the next slide. The retail market is another source of strength, though I would take that with a little bit of a grain of salt. We saw 12 new businesses open in Q3. That's a little bit of a drop off from year-over-year retail openings. I will say the positive note in terms of retail in Lower Manhattan that we are back almost to the number of retailers that we had in the district pre-COVID, which is certainly a good sign. The flip side of that is that developers have added new retail space onto the market. So we do have a decent amount of vacancy and vacant retail in the district. Of the new retailers that we've been seeing opening, certainly since COVID, the vast majority of them have been food and beverage businesses.
Independent or chain?
Right.
Mostly independent.
Really?
Yeah, mostly independent.
Okay.
New openings this quarter, Metropolis, Cookie Odyssey, Dim Sum Palace, which is great on William Street. In addition to the neighborhood, Delmonico's reopened, which we're very happy to see. So there definitely have been some good movements on the retail side. Open Squash, which is an interesting retail use. We've seen a couple of these Open Squash. What's the other one?
Court 16.
Court 16 at 20 Liberty. Thank you, Dana. Which I think is an interesting, sort of feeds into, I think, DCP's presentation coming later, an interesting sort of alternative use for some of the more difficult to lease retail spaces in the district, especially subgrade or above grade retail spaces. That might be more challenging for what we think of as traditional bricks and mortar retail.
Josh, do you know anything about the 175 Water Space? Are any of those pieces coming online, or are they coming online?
That's a great question. I wish I had a little bit more insight into what's going on at that building.
So big mystery.
It's a little bit of a mystery. We've heard some very interesting things, but we have made a lot of effort to get some more detailed information about what the plans are there. Have not been super successful.
Where is Open Squash? Like, is that a
Open Splash is at 100 Pearl Street,
sub?
former 7 Hanover.
The 10th floor.
Yeah.
Of 100 for 117.
And of course, we don't have a picture here, but the Ronald Perlman Performing Arts Center opened in September, which was a great addition to the neighborhood. And I think something that will hopefully, and we're going to try to promote that. We've been saying for many years, that sort of the Lower Manhattan economy has, if you look at that as sort of a three-legged stool, we've got a lot of great restaurants. We've got a lot of new and interesting retail coming to the district. But I think the one sort of part of that stool that has been missing since September 11th is entertainment venues. And I think with the Performing Arts Center opening, with Pier 17, that sort of adds a new component to the overall mix of what's happening in Lower Manhattan and helps promote this neighborhood as really a complete picture of a place that you can work and you can live and play and have that entire experience downtown. We can move on and talk a little bit about some of the placemaking work that we are doing. I think most of the folks in the room know the Downtown Alliance has made a substantial commitment to sort of placemaking and events and trying to activate the public realm downtown. We were doing some of that pre-COVID. We've doubled down on that and have made a real commitment to continue doing that post-COVID to help bring a little bit more activity and interest to the neighborhood. The next slide, Tammy. So just a little bit of a reminder, we are working again with the organization called Art on the Ave. We did a great project with them in the fall of 2021 called Resiliency, which was activating 27 locations up and down the Broadway corridor. Art on the Ave is a great local organization founded by a woman named Barbara Anderson, who teaches at a local school here in Lower Manhattan. And she and her daughter started doing this work during COVID, first on the Columbus Avenue on the Upper West Side, trying to activate vacant storefronts with art. Their model is to work with local artists. All the artists are based in New York City. They make a real effort to encourage participation from artists coming from underrepresented communities, people of color, et cetera. And the model that Art on the Ave uses is all of the artists can sell their work, and the artists get 100% of the sale price for any of the work that's sold in these exhibitions. So we did a great project with them in 2021. We are working with them again. If you want to move to the next slide, please, Danny. Our concept is called Art Above the Mantle. We're going to be focusing on the Nassau Street corridor, which I think everybody can agree needs a little bit of tender love and care. We've got a decent number of vacant storefronts right now along Nassau Street. We have identified 7 to 8, so we're almost finished with getting the full list down of storefronts along Nassau Street that we're going to be activating, calling it Art Above the Mantle. It's a sort of holiday themed activation. It's going to be running from Thanksgiving weekend through the end of the year. These are going to be sort of small spaces. Obviously, there's smaller storefronts on Nassau Street than what we worked with on Broadway. And the concept here is that it's all going to be around these sort of very cool, kind of colorful designed sort of fake mantelpieces to give a sense of sort of hearth and warmth for the holiday season. The artists are going to be asked to create some smaller pieces and some, sort of smaller pieces of art that'll be priced under $100 and hopefully a little bit more accessible for people to purchase as little sort of holiday gifts for friends and family. And uniquely and very different from what we did with Art on the Ave, the project that we did with Resiliency on Broadway, which obviously still during COVID, we didn't invite anybody into those spaces. That was all a passive activation that you saw from the street front. This is going to be a little bit different. We're going to have some workshops and interactive galleries and invite the public in to some of these spaces. Want to go to the next slide, please? So this is some of the locations. We have a few more that we actually just signed agreements with. The sort of anchor of the project is going to be at 33 Maiden Lane. That's the Federal Reserve's office building. The 2 big storefronts that they have that have been vacant for a while on Nassau Street, where there used to be a Hallmark and a Godiva. The former Hallmark space on the corner on Maiden Lane there is going to be sort of the central location.
Big space.
Yeah, it's a big space. We're going to be activating that. They're going to be artists actually working in that space and producing work. And they're going to be organizing a series of sort of community events that will be every week, starting the week after Thanksgiving and running through the week before Christmas. There'll be events on Wednesdays that'll be a little bit more geared towards hoping to attract some of the office workers in the neighborhood. And then Saturday events that we're going to be gearing more towards families, young kids, folks that live in the neighborhood. So stay tuned for that. We'll be getting a list of what those activations will be. And hopefully we'd love for you guys to publicize that and get that out to your lists and hopefully see some of you there. And then we'll be doing an opening event on November 29th, if I remember the date, the Wednesday after Thanksgiving to sort of kick off the whole project. And if you walk up and down the street today, you can see they're already Art on the Ave and Barbara and her team are in some of these spaces already doing the installation right now. So we're excited about this. I think it's gonna be a really fun project and hopefully something that also looks at, again, thinking about how we can think about some of these vacant retail spaces and think a little bit creatively about how some of that vacant retail can potentially be activated and programmed and used that might not be, what we've all thought of as the past as a traditional sort of bricks and mortar retail uses as we move into a very different era in the retail market. The next slide, please. And just finally, a couple of live events that we're doing Wednesday, December 6th and December 13th. Our LM Live programming series continues. We're just talking about the event that we did last week with Ken Burns and Michael Kimmelman from the New York Times showing Ken Burns's Brooklyn Bridge documentary. We have an event coming up on December 6th that's looking at the role of sort of law and public service and power and how all of that intersects. It's going to be Wednesday, December 6th at the Bankers Club at 120 Broadway. And then on December 13th, we're partnering with the Alamo Drafthouse at 20th Liberty, and we're going to be screening Inside Man, Spike Lee movie that was almost entirely filmed in Lower Manhattan. It was a great movie if anybody hasn't seen it.
Exactly. Tickets required.
These are ticketed events, yes. Yeah.
Right?
And then next slide, please. Oh, please.
I have lots of questions, and Tammy, I have to get the small business subcommittee going again, but just so I understand the presentation, I'm so sorry, I was late. I was really came here specifically for this. Independent retail is resilient, is what you're saying?
Mhm.
Office is definitely not resilient.
Office is challenged. Yeah,
Yeah.
office is challenged. I mean, the retail market in downtown, and again, there are a lot of vacancies in the district. I don't want to paint too rosy a picture of what we're seeing in terms of the retail front. And I think if you talk to existing retailers in terms of how they're doing, there's a wide gamut.
How much of this would you blame on hybrid and work from home?
In terms of challenges that retail is seeing, a lot
No,
of.
office.
Oh, yes, I mean, hybrid obviously is a huge impact on that. I mean, look, office, the challenges of office leasing largely stem from hybrid work. There are also a lot of very serious macroeconomic issues that are impacting
Right.
decision makers in terms of, are you gonna stick with the amount of space that you have currently? Are you gonna look to move to a different location? Are you gonna expand or shrink the amount of office space that you have?
And sorry, just to keep this rolling, because I know that a lot of people have questions, and we want to move on, but are you not seeing an impact on smaller retail businesses for a lack of office workers?
I think we are. Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, and again, I think in terms of, you look at the breadth of retail that we have in the district, I think the retailers that are doing the best are
Yep.
retailers that are more focused on or have been more adept at tailoring their services and targeting the residential population in the
Yep.
district, right? We have about 66,000 people that live in Lower Manhattan right now. It's a well-educated, fairly affluent population. And then obviously it's been a huge boon to the retail market downtown. The businesses that are suffering more are businesses that have been traditionally more closely targeted to the daytime 9 to 5 worker population.
And Tammy, I promise, just a couple really quick rapid fire questions.
Stop apologizing and just.
I don't, like, you know how I get when people ask questions, so, I want to know how we can help, but I will, if it's okay with Tammy, I will convene another small business subcommittee thing and Patrick. But, regulatorily wise, I know I have a personal issue with the GCT tax, but what can or should the city do, should the city do outside of like the regular regulatory stuff, like trash and the sidewalks, forever? But what can they do to make it easier for at least the businesses that have been backed up in 3 sentences?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot, the regulatory environment around starting and running a business, a
Yes.
small business in New York. As we all know, and anybody who's done that, it's Byzantine. The city does not make it easy to open a business.
No.
And there, I mean, we could spend hours and hours talking about
Yep.
everything that can be done on that front. And there are plenty of great policy papers that have been put together about how the city can improve its regulatory approach to small businesses. I think both the regulatory environment and the tax environment has to be looked at
But Tammy, I don't
for a
know
lot
if
of
this,
small retailers.
Regulatory for economic opportunity.
Possible. It's a segue here.
Sorry, it's easy.
Tammy, I don't know if
Good
this,
job.
Little jab.
I don't know if this needs a resolution or not, but I will convene it again if you want to. And I think we should put together a package of suggestions, recommendations to the city council, which will be reflective of things that we passed together 3 years ago that they didn't listen to us on.
We should also have an urban planner in place to take a look at our zoning outside
Yeah,
of
sure.
DCP, so sorry. And see, because what we've talked about for years at Community Board One was a small business district.
Yeah.
A small business zoning incubator to provide tax breaks for small businesses. That doesn't
Tax
take
incentive.
away from the residential opportunities for affordable housing.
Right. Would that extend just to retail storefront, or would you include
That's a
3 to
conversation,
4 offices too?
I mean, that's a conversation to be had.
Yeah.
Right.
Meeting.
Yes.
Because we have 6 employees now, we're in the 85th floor of the World Trade Center, and I can barely afford to pay my taxes because of the city. My federal taxes, state taxes, no problem. The city is killing me.
Colin, we talk about that, that's a big fight.
Yeah, it's a huge
Big
fight.
But we can, not saying it's not worthy, just, we'll talk about whether.
Yeah, no, that's why I was trying to end it there, but
And also because-
Subcommittee to talk about.
Well, yes.
that's literally what I was just trying to end it there.
I'm supportive of that.
Okay,
Michael?
Any insights into the office and retail marketplace at the South Street Seaport?
I can't really speak to office. There's not a huge amount of office there. ESPN is unfortunately leaving their studio space at Pier 17, which is unfortunate. There's a decent amount of office space. The retail, as far as I know, their retail leasing has been relatively strong. There's not a huge amount of vacancy in that area. In terms of how well those businesses are doing, I don't really have a lot of that data. Just how successful they've been, yeah.
So, where the Seaport District is itself is, not part of the bid district, so in terms of our research and statistics, we don't have detailed as compared to information about that area.
But there's not a lot of vacancy in that area. In terms of vacancy in the district, there are concentrations of vacant spaces on Fulton Street, Nassau Corridor, a little bit on Broad Street, less than Broadway. But vacancy is not a concern.
Josh, if you can set on what that portends within this like, this previously planned projects like two World Trade Center.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Two World Trade Center, for example, was previously all commercial, maybe a TV center. Doesn't look like that's a good idea right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna be very difficult. I know that the folks at Silverstein have some new designs for that building. I know they're continuing to try to look for anchor tenants. They had been considering doing a speculative office development at Two World Trade prior to the pandemic. I think there's absolutely zero interest in financing speculative office development, certainly in New York City at the moment. So it's still very much TBD what that will look like. And there's a lot of office space on the market right now. There's about 22 million square feet of vacancy right now in Manhattan. So to put that in context, that's more office space than the World Trade Center and Brookfield Place combined.
So
That's
it's hard to
vacant in the
justify.
district. Yeah, to add another 3 million square feet to that would be a little bit challenging to do. Yeah.
Other questions? Yeah, oh, Alice, hi, Alice, why don't you come up and join us? What are you doing over there?
It doesn't matter. I don't want, no, it's fine. Hi,
Hi,
you're
Elsa.
Mr. Dante asked the obvious question, which is, when we all began, many years ago, how is that Water Street text amendment, product, passing forward? In other words, what impact is really, is the Alliance working with all of this development in terms of considering what will happen to these privately owned public spaces in front of each building? They seem to be either, of course, let go completely or be somewhat privatized and becoming lobbies and entryways for these buildings. So I'm sort of curious, are you working with them in any way, or is there a way that our community could be working in trying to forecast ways to make these viable, wonderful spaces again?
I actually think that.
And specifically, I'm going to ask you 77 and 200.
I actually think that the current office market creates an incentive for owners to actually make some of those investments. And some of the more intelligent owners, not just in lower Manhattan, but around the city are realizing that that public space is, whereas before COVID, they would view that as a little bit of a burden that they had to maintain for regulatory reasons. I think a lot of these property owners are realizing that that's a potential amenity for the building. And they're looking for any sort of competitive advantage that they can get. And I think there is an incentive for owners to make investments in some of those public spaces as a way to create new amenities for either their existing tenants or prospective tenants in the building.
What about ones that are going under conversion into becoming residential? You're saying that's also been interest to a developer?
I think it will be, yeah. I mean, it's a competitive market, right? And there's a lot of new residential development happening in the neighborhood. And you certainly want to have an attractive space, attract residential tenants in the building.
And can you
So
tell
I
us?
think we're hoping to see some of that. But again, it is also a very, very challenged market. And I think everybody has to keep that in mind. Financing is extraordinarily difficult for any sort of commercial property owner right now, given the uncertainties around the future of office usage and the macroeconomic issues that everybody is dealing with in terms of the interest rate environment growing. So getting financing for new projects and being able to move forward with those sorts of substantial investments is challenging for a lot of owners.
And
Anyone would like to do it.
Right. Can you also just give us a brief, whatever you know on 77 Water Street, is there any movement there?
I have not heard what their latest plans are for that space. I know they had a very ambitious vision for that public plaza pre-COVID. What they're looking at now and what's going to be feasible given the current market, I can't speak to.
It would be great if we could get ahead of that rather than behind it, so just to keep us in mind. And also 200 Water, basically we're going to have to wait out the lease on the Duane Reade.
That's my understanding, yeah.
And are there any other? private-
There's nobody else who's looking at doing a project construction. as far as that.
Thanks very much.
Anything else?
Yeah, well, what about the building in Carlisle and Washington? Where's that stand and how much is that? I believe it's residential, correct?
I believe it is. I would have to look up the actual address. I don't know off the top of my
Yeah.
head. I'm sorry.
I know it was a Washington Street address, but then they've adopted the Carlisle address. But my understanding that was gonna be affordable, how many units?
That I don't know off the top of my head, but we can get back to that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's
We
been
can follow
very
up too
little,
on that.
very little buzz about it,
Yeah.
but my understanding was it was gonna be 100% affordable, but who knows?
Would that be
it's like
hotel weather?
I
50
don't think it's 100% affordable. There are a handful of projects in the district that have added a small amount of affordable housing, but I'm not aware of anybody who's doing 100% affordable.
Yeah.
Downtown, but we can certainly, I will look into that and follow up.
It's one of those things that I do think, in pursuant to what we're all talking about today, and I look back at the DCP, is that there has to be some kind of tax incentive to provide if, I love the fact that the mayor was in Lower Manhattan, touting the conversions from office to luxury rentals, but we need affordable housing in Lower Manhattan. So anything that we can do to take a look at that, that does not take away residential housing, but instead supports the search for affordable in any positive way, I think would be great.
And I think we would absolutely agree with that, Tammy. I mean, we're all for adding more affordable housing to the district. I think that should be a part of the conversation for residential conversions. That being said, I think it is extremely challenging for property owners to do that, if not impossible, without some sort of tax release. And some sort of incentive program to make that work. A lot of these conversions are extremely challenging to do already, even with the market clearing prices that they're getting for these units, which are extremely high. It's still difficult to make them pencil out for these large floor plate, post-1960 office buildings.
But, you know, that's a conversation that we've been having, because for community board one, affordable housing takes precedence over almost everything else, because it find people a place to live, that they're not on the street, helps prevent people from going down a path of destruction.
Anything else? Going once, twice. Thank you, Josh. You, Tina.
Thank you for including us.
Appreciate you guys.
And again,
I was gonna ask you wanted to add, and I figured you look so comfy over there. Why?
I make this point every time we come here, but all of this data and everything else that we collect is all available on our website. On our research page, it's all there, free and available. And if anybody has follow-up questions or specific questions about any of this data, please feel free to reach out to me directly.
And in all honesty, we really appreciate you guys coming so regularly.
Of course, yeah, happy to provide the update.
A quarterly day for this.
Are you leaving?
Absolutely.
No, I actually.
We've been asked to stay for the
So-
presentation.
Ready,
No,
I'm gonna sit back over here so you can have the meeting, yeah.
Audience seats.
Right out of the fire and into the frying pan for them.
But I do want to say thank you, because I did ask the Downtown Alliance specifically to stay through the next presentation with DCP, because you are under A for the first supporter on the list. But it's that gets you, but you're also, you know, you are the Downtown Alliance in our neighborhood and an important partner. So
And with that perfect transition, we are now going to hear our first formal presentation on the zoning for economic opportunity text amendment, which is, as everybody should remember, is part of the part 2 of 3 of the City of Yes initiative, Mayor's initiative. This is a large, complex, some might say unwieldy application of things that we got to deal with. It's over 1,100 pages. So we're going to distill it in some amount of time. And then after we hear from our friends at the Department of City Planning, who are the applicants on the text amendment, George James, our land use consultant, is going to help us work through some of the problems and the issues. So buckle in. It's going to be a bit of a long one. We have currently, and I'll ask the DCP folks to give us the exact timing on referral and due dates, et cetera. I know there are community boards who've asked for additional time. I don't know where that stands, and perhaps you can address that. But we'll get there. We'll understand our timing. But as it stands right now, this is going to be our first of 2 presentations, and by our December full board meeting, we're going to need to put forward a resolution unless things change. So with that,
Francis has her hand up, so that's the only thing I want to.
oh, sorry.
Francis, did you want to?
No, I'm having a problem with this, but no, I don't have my hand up. I'm trying to take it down. Sorry.
Got it. All right. With
With
that, take it away.
yeah, so Ezra,
I'm sorry,
Everybody
when you
else?
say first of 2 on the economic opportunities, or there's 2 of those, so when would the next one be?
no, we don't know yet. So there are, well, This is the first of our two meetings. on this Zoning text amendment. There are three components to the WVS initiative. This is the second of three. And the third one, we're not sure yet.
Got it.
So
Just flagging, we will cover it in the presentation, but January 8th is actually when the referral period's over. And we are, considering some of the requests have come in from, a variety of community boards about timing. There is a bit of a grace period after January 8th to submit your resolution if, timing lines up for some community boards. Like, let's say that, your full board is the week after January 8th to ratify it. So we will be back in December, but for some community boards, maybe they'll have a crack at it in January as well. And we're always on hand to answer questions, forward them to the right people, et cetera. So just want to, cover that briefly before Matt get into it.
yeah, thanks, Ezra. Ezra and Matt are gonna split this up. I'm not sure how you guys wanna.
I'm sorry, just got one more clarification question. So at our, theoretically, at our December board meeting, we need to do a resolution on all three?
No,
Or just the economic opportunity?
15 proposals that are within the economic opportunity.
Got it, but in the economic opportunity only.
That's it. Right, but it has 18.
Yes, little detail there.
Great.
Hi, everyone. My name is Matt Gutierrez, and I'm the DCP liaison for CD1. Thank you so much for having us. So far, it's only been virtual for my interactions with you, so it's very nice to see you guys in person. So we're lucky to be joined by Matt Waskovitz, who is a lead planner and project manager for the city of Yes for economic opportunity. He's done a really tremendous amount of work on this initiative and knows these proposals really deeply. So it's great that he could join us tonight. We're also joined by Erica Copeland, who is a planning fellow. Great to have you with us as well. And Ezra Moser, who you just heard from, is the Central Business District team leader, and he's, of course, attending virtually. Next slide, please. So here's a quick preview of what to expect from tonight's presentation. I'll begin by providing a general overview of CEO CD1's current economic conditions and a high-level description of these proposals. Then we'll transition over to the applicability maps for CD1 to see how these proposals would be impacting specific zoning districts in the area. And you can also find printed copies. I brought 10 different copies. Maybe if there's not enough, we can maybe share. I also brought printed versions of those as well to reference if that's helpful. So items 1 and 2 will be relatively brief, lasting about 20 minutes. If you want to reserve as much time as possible, we call to steer the conversation whatever direction is most helpful for you. We realize that some of these proposals are, we want to dive into the details more than others. And we have a bunch of different appendix slides that go into much more deeper depth in terms of the specificity of each proposal. And so based on what your preferences are in that kind of final point, the Q&A, we can go to those slides and get into the weeds for those. Next slide, please. So zoning for economic opportunity, the text amendment that we'll be discussing tonight, is the second of 3 citywide text amendments that is a part of City of Yes. The first was zoning for carbon neutrality, which was designed to help New York City reduce its carbon emissions by 80% by 2050. And that was referred recently, and I'm sure this committee remembers it well. The third and final citywide text amendment following ZEO will be zoning for housing opportunity, which is an exciting set of proposals that aims to expand and diversify New York City's housing supply, and that's expected to begin public review in spring of 2024. So ZEO was certified on October 30th and has been referred out to all community boards, borough presidents, and borough boards until January 8th. It will then go to the City Planning Commission and then to City Council. Next slide, please. So this committee is well aware of how consequential zoning decisions are to local businesses and how it dictates where they can open, how they operate, and how they can expand. Next slide, please. So as we just heard in the previous presentation, New York can be a very challenging place to run a business, and unfortunately, zoning often further complicates matters. The ZR often precludes the siting and prospective businesses outright, or imposes a challenging set of rules, such as preventing a bar from advertising the show time of an upcoming performance, or setting a strict cap on the amount of floor area a bakery can use for actually baking. This results in businesses feeling confused and frustrated, storefronts that are vacant, and less vibrant neighborhoods. The overarching vision for this initiative is to make sure that zoning works for our economy and not against it. The current zoning resolution is 60 years old and has not entirely kept pace with New York's evolving economy and retail landscape. This text amendment will make the ZR simpler, more adaptable, and modern. Next slide, please. So I'm going to quickly go over 4 overarching goals for ZEO, and all of these, the 18 proposals are nestled into these 4 buckets. So goal number 1, we want to make it easier for businesses to find spaces to grow by lifting zoning barriers that prevent them from locating to their customers. In most cases, our zoning rules governing businesses have not been updated since the early 1960s, and it's high time they reflect and respond to today's economy. Goal number 2, we want to support growing industries by reducing zoning obstacles for emerging business types. Industries such as urban agriculture, life sciences, and amusements face ambiguity or outdated restrictions. We want to address these obstacles so emerging businesses can thrive and create jobs across all 5 boroughs. Goal number 3. Our third goal is to foster vibrant neighborhoods by ensuring businesses contribute to active, safe, and walkable streets. And goal number 4. Our fourth and final goal is to create new kinds of discretionary zoning tools that enable businesses to expand and adapt. And so now we'll transition, I'll go still at a fairly high level through the 18 proposals, and bear in mind that any of these that we touch upon, we can go into far more depth later on during the Q&A with more detailed slides. So proposal number 1. Today, storefronts that are deemed non-conforming face an arbitrary 2-year clock for reactivation, or else they have to remain vacant, a direct contributor to vacancy in our city. And we're proposing to remove this clock so vacant storefronts can be reoccupied. Proposal 2. In many places in the city, we have similar zoning districts that are located along the same corridors or right across the street from one another, yet they allow different types of businesses to occur. This outdated and confusing sets of rules routinely holds back businesses from locating and expanding. We're proposing to simplify the differences between similar kinds of zoning districts to make it easier for businesses to know where they can and cannot locate.
I'm sorry to interrupt. It would be so helpful, and maybe nobody's going to agree with this. Can you give like one line on why the zoning was the way it was in 1916? You, for example, on the first 2, why that was employed by the city?
So for the
Okay.
yeah, for the first one, that, correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, but this is primarily an issue in, so this is a residential area restriction. So basically, they were grandfathered in to their existing businesses were in certain areas. Those were zoned as residential areas. And basically they were allowed to continue to exist even though they were non-conforming, with the idea that eventually those uses would transition away and essentially die out into commercial areas. But we've seen how useful and valuable that those types of locally serving communities-based organizations and businesses can be in an area that wouldn't normally allow, as of right, commercial spaces today. So that's one. And Matt, maybe, I don't know if maybe for the second one, maybe we reserve that for the Q&A portion. I just want to make sure that.
You could do them all, then I just think it would be helpful to understand why we originally, as a city, decided upon this, and then why we're looking to change it. It's sort of helpful.
I'm happy to expand it.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. Matt Waskevitz, Senior Planner in our Economic Development and Regional Planning Division and City Planning. I think it's helpful to understand the context in which the 1961 zoning resolution was adopted. And that was based primarily on what the city's economy looked like in the late 1950s, predominantly manufacturing, but responding to what they thought the future would be much more car-centric. So oftentimes you see in our zoning the idea of a central business district where you have offices and the idea that people would flock to those offices and then at 5 o'clock. So the idea of mixed use communities was fundamentally not part of what the 61 zoning resolution did. Despite the fact that our city then, as our city is now, never was Euclidean in its nature. You never had a separation cleanly of office, residential, and manufacturing or industrial. You had residences in industrial areas. You had residences in office districts and vice versa. So recognizing that the zoning didn't reflect reality then and certainly doesn't today, and recognizing especially many of the challenges businesses have faced coming out of the pandemic, years leading into the pandemic, it is far past due to update a lot of these distinctions that were made in the 60s, didn't make sense then, certainly don't make sense now, and are making it even harder for businesses to recover and for our economy to continue to transform. What this means locally, I think Josh already put really well, which is that brick and mortar retail is transitioning into more experiential and more focused on intangible goods as well as services. And our zoning has fundamentally not kept up with that paradigm because a lot of the kinds of things we see in experiential retail, for example, just didn't exist. You didn't have laser tag, you didn't have escape rooms, you didn't have mini golf. So the zoning has piecemeal tried to update things over time, but there hasn't been a comprehensive update for how we think about businesses. So I'm happy to go into more depth on each of the 18 rationale, but that's kind of setting the context.
That's terrific, that's very helpful.
Yeah, certainly didn't have axe throwing.
No axe throwing.
Yeah, thank you, Matt.
Off the top of my head.
It's just a one-time experience anyway.
So back to you, Matt.
No, that was really helpful context. Thank you, Matt. So for proposal number 3, so despite changes, and this kind of links back to what you were just saying, despite changes in technology and a vastly different economy, our city's zoning rules are stuck in the 1960s in how they treat many different kinds of makerspaces. So we want to allow small scale clean production like pottery studios or jewelry makers to locate in commercial districts for the first time, instead of only being allowed to locate in manufacturing districts. Proposal 4. If one of the clean production businesses in the last proposal wanted to move into an empty office building today, they would face rules that may require them to add additional loading docks, even if the business owner doesn't need them, want them, or if the building itself cannot physically accommodate them. We want to allow older commercial buildings to change over time without mandating businesses tear apart the ground floor of the building to provide these loading docks. Proposal 5. Today, zoning allows for many buildings to have a mix of residential and commercial uses, but zoning sometimes restricts businesses from being able to use upper floors. This limits options for new buildings to be constructed that contain both residences and businesses, and for older buildings to adapt over time. We want to enable renovations or new construction for mixed-use buildings in these places where it makes sense, by allowing commercial uses at the same level or above residences, but provided that there is a complete separation between uses and that is maintained. Proposal 6. Our zoning has updated the terms it uses to classify many types of businesses in over 60 years, and it's full of very antiquated categories like typewriter repair, making it harder for newer businesses like cell phone repair shops to know where they can locate. As a result, we're proposing to simplify and modernize the terms that we use in zoning to classify these businesses. So that wraps up goal 1. So next slide, please. Great, thank you. So proposal 7. Businesses that want to operate indoor agriculture facilities, such as vertical farming, within commercial areas often face uncertainty with today's zoning rules. We would clarify that indoor agriculture is allowed in commercial districts, so food can be grown closer to communities. Proposal 8. Life science laboratories face confusing and outdated rules that slow the development of new facilities. We would make it clear that labs that do not pose a potential environmental hazard are appropriate in office settings. And we'd expand the areas where an existing special permit can be used so that labs can locate closer to research centers, such as hospitals and universities. Proposal 9. Restaurants and bars face confusing regulations on whether they can host concerts, dancing, comedy shows, or open mic nights. We're simplifying these rules so that they're based on the size of the venue rather than the activity occurring within it. Small venues would be allowed in neighborhood commercial corridors, and larger venues could locate in places that are higher density, such as Lower Manhattan. Proposal 10. Zoning has outdated terms for defining experiential amusement businesses that we just talked about earlier, such as virtual reality or arcades, and often restricts these kinds of businesses to locations such as Coney Island or the city's industrial areas. We would simplify and modernize how zoning treats amusements and recreational activities to make it clear that these businesses are allowed indoors at a small scale on a neighborhood street, and also indoors at a larger scale in high-density districts. And lastly, in this goal is Proposal 11. Many New Yorkers start their businesses in their homes, and zoning allows for a wide range of home business types, such as lawyers, jewelry makers, and music teachers. However, this is not the case for other occupations like barbers or interior decorators. We would like to foster entrepreneurship with modern rules for home-based businesses, while keeping in place safeguards to ensure that home-based businesses are good neighbors. Next slide, please. Thank you. So Proposal 12. Streetscape conditions like long blank walls and drive-throughs that break up retail streets can create unpleasant and sometimes unsafe conditions. However, in much of the city, there are no rules whatsoever to prevent new buildings from making conditions even worse. We're proposing to create a consistent and easy to understand set of rules for the commercial ground floor design, ones that are more responsive in areas with greater pedestrian activity and more relaxed in the city's more auto-oriented corridors. Proposal 13. Auto servicing and repair businesses are typically treated as industrial businesses and located far from retail streets and residential neighborhoods. Some exceptions exist that allow auto repair and storage activities to spill out onto the sidewalk in neighborhood commercial streets, which create safety concerns for pedestrians. We're proposing to rationalize to consolidate the range of these auto servicing uses and zoning into two categories: light and heavy vehicle repair maintenance. Proposal 14. Zoning does not allow for delivery activity within buildings except in industrial areas, forcing the activity and drop-offs to occur on sidewalks. So we've all seen plenty of double-parked delivery trucks, and we're proposing to create a new type of use called zoning called a micro-distribution facility that would allow businesses to locate at a small scale in commercial areas and incentivize a transition to smaller scale, more sustainable delivery methods. And we can just go to the next slide.
Yeah, sorry, the devil's in the details, so I'm itchy.
No, this is kind of laying out a very high level view of all of them, and all of these that you want to get into, like in depth. The plan is to have as much time at the end that we can do that.
How much is much time at the end?
I mean,
Probably more than you're willing to.
I want to hear from, I appreciate you, but I'd like to hear from him.
It's kind of up to us now.
Yeah,
We're here as late as you want.
yeah, it's just, you're running the show, so things
Keep it
as
moving.
you like.
Cut it short,
Yeah.
we've heard this before.
No, we haven't. And,
Yeah.
So.
Let's keep going.
Yeah, so we are close to the end of these overviews, so
We had this.
we're getting close. I appreciate the patience. So we're gonna go to proposal 15 now. So in practice, I just will note that this proposal isn't too applicable to Community District 1, but it would enable, residents serving retail services and maker spaces to locate in NYCHA and other residential campuses. Proposal 16, this is similar to what I just mentioned. This proposal would allow, kind of create a process to allow for new, corner stores, bodegas to serve, in communities and residential areas where they're not currently allowed as of right. Proposal 17. In some instances, businesses lack options in waiving certain non-FAR related zoning rules. So for instance, film studios often struggle to build sound stages because of certain zoning rules like yard requirements or setback heights. And so we would like to expand the zoning toolkit to waive some of these zoning rules on a case-by-case basis. And lastly, proposal 18. In some instances, our zoning districts, not discretionary pathways to modify them, those are obsolete. This is particularly true of the city's manufacturing district designation. So currently, low-density options, physical design rules, and parking regulations make it impossible to build loft-style buildings, even in areas where they currently exist. Proposal will create a range of new job-intensive zoning districts at various densities and height, expanding the toolkit for future rezonings. So not basically getting nothing. A part of this proposal is not to rezone any specific area. It's just to create more types of zoning districts to allow future rezonings. All right, next slide, please. All right, congratulations, everyone. We weathered the storm. We got through all 18 together.
To orient everybody, the next bunch of slides are going to be very specific to Community District 1 in our area. Okay.
Yeah. So now let's take a quick look at current economic conditions in CD1, and some of this we just heard about in the previous presentation. So Community District 1 is home to about 322,000 jobs, and as you might expect, the highest concentration is in office industries. Private sector employment in the area is at 95% of pre-pandemic levels, so jobs have not fully recovered. Although CD1 boasts a high concentration of jobs relative to many other community districts, this 95% is just below that of the rest of Manhattan at 96% and lags behind the city's overall economic recovery of 99%. So given the proliferation of remote work, central business districts like Lower Manhattan face unique economic challenges. Not only are many commercial towers struggling to attract tenants, local businesses that rely on commuter foot traffic have also suffered. So unsurprisingly, of the 2,300 storefronts that are in CD1, about 22% of these are vacant. This is a rate that's higher than the rest of Manhattan. The average is 16% and considerably higher than the city's overall average of 12%.
Why?
So the map on the right side illustrates where storefronts are located, and it's specified by site that it's quite small. But just for tonight's conversations, we're focusing on the empty black circles, and those denote the vacancies themselves. And these are also, again, this presentation has been shared, so if you're curious to dig into this data, we actually pulled all of this from Live XYZ, and they have really, really interesting storefront information that has vacancy information as well. So I encourage you to go there. And so while zoning cannot solve all of CD1's economic concerns by any stretch, it can certainly serve as a significant step toward addressing them. Next slide, please.
Before you go to the next slide, you have a notation on here, which are Class C and Class B office, when you're looking at vacancies versus A, based on the conversations that have been had.
To be clear, these are storefronts, so they're not designated as Class A, B, or C.
But the buildings they are in, if they're in commercial buildings are.
They would be, but not with this data set. Data set comes from Live XYZ, not linked to the class of the office building that it's residing.
Do you think you could get that far?
It might take considerable time and resources, but I'll take it back.
With DCK? Go for
And
it.
also I would caution comparing two data sets that are vastly different methodologies, because we would do the Class A, B, and C data star, which is very different than what Live XYZ uses for storefronts. So I would, even if we could compare the two, I would caution anything more than correlation between them.
So now we'll be going through a handful of applicability maps again. These are the same ones that are printed out in these packets. And we'll be looking at specifically how the zoning districts that are located in this community district would be affected. So next slide, please.
Can I ask a question before we move on? The maps?
Yeah.
Is there a reason that Governor's Island was omitted from these?
Yeah, so a lot of these, the proposals are disproportionately will be affecting Lower Manhattan, like Financial District, Tribeca. And so if basically given the unique sets of rules surrounding those locations, they're not shown in these maps, but in the appendix slides, which we can go to if you'd like, it includes Governor's Island, Liberty Island, Ellis Island as well.
Let me just jump in really quickly and say that these have very specific use and urban design frameworks, so they are effectively unchanged by this. That's also part of the reason why we really wanted to place the emphasis where the changes have, you know, real material differences. But again, Governor's Island, take that as an example, like that has, you know, a very, very specific use and urban design regimen for it. So.
So if we do not include Governor's Island in this presentation, it's chopping off a part of our district that we worked very hard with and wiping away. We need to understand what changes are relevant for Governor's Island. It's not a just take a look here. It's an all encompassing for our district, please. And I see some
We can
people
get you those.
for heat, so I'm gonna put on some air conditioning.
Thank you. I'm losing weight.
Great, so this initial slide, this is showing change or how DEO proposals would be affecting all the zoning districts. So as you can see in the chart, and I know it's small, the font up there, but I can read it out for you. So this is where the modernized loading dock rules would be implemented. The simplification and modernizing of use terms, so no more terms like telegraph offices. Businesses would be able to access a more rationalized waiver process to seek zoning modifications through the BSA or the CPC. And lastly, new types of commercial and manufacturing zoning districts added to the zoning toolkit, so would enable potential future zonings, or rezonings rather. Next slide, please.
Can you explain in the BSA and CPC factor, does it remove the role of the community board?
I don't believe so.
No, so what that proposal does is that some uses have access to a BSA permit to modify things like a size restriction, other uses do not. And so this creates uniformity, but it does not remove the ability. It creates uniformity across different uses when it comes to both BSA and CPC.
So we don't need to spend much time on this slide. It's just to note there are no C1 districts here. So in the Q&A portion, if you want or if you're curious to dig into this and how it can affect the rest of New York City, happy to come back. But in the essence of time, I think we could go to the next slide.
And you'll come back to us specific for what applies in Governor's, Ellis.
Yes, we will. And the same is true for C2 districts. Again, we're happy to come back to this later if it's of interest, but we can go to the next one. All right, so one of the main thrusts of CEO is to bring similar high density commercial districts such as C4, C5, and C6 districts into greater alignment in terms of what commercial uses are permitted. And so because of this, this might be confusing, but let me walk you through it. So we can go quickly through the C4 and C5 district slides to kind of reacquaint ourselves in terms of geographically where they're situated. But then we can kind of go through all of these, the chart of proposed changes and how they would impact the area on the C6 slide. And the reason for that is because the previous the proposals, will all be bringing them into greater alignment with C6 districts. They're all kind of basically bringing up C4, C5 districts into greater alignment with the C6s. So as you can see here, there's just a single C4 district that it's quite faint. It runs along the East River waterfront on the right side of that map. Next slide, please.
That would be our historic Seaport district for the most part, as well as the EDC full new build out of whatever commercial space comes from the Lower Manhattan Coastal Resiliency Project, from the Brooklyn Bridge to the Banner. Correct.
Yep. And so a significant portion of CD1 is made up of C5 districts, and this is primarily located in the financial districts. And then once we go to the next slide, I can kind of dig into how all three of these districts would be impacted.
So just to understand, you're taking a
Yeah.
C4, which is along the water.
Yeah.
Which is mostly parkland and the piers right now. And homogenizing it with C5, which is growing C5 and 6. C5 is one of the largest growing residential communities and has been in New York for decades. We are. So if I look and I go to the next slide, you're homogenizing everything through the district, all historic districts, everything.
Well, so
I'm just trying to get it
no,
clear.
we're bringing them into great alignment as far as commercial uses go, but in terms of everything bulk related, those, we're not conflating those. We're not like suddenly saying all of the bulk.
We were making no changes to bulk. The only changes proposed that Matt's discussing right now are regarding use and the kinds of businesses that are allowed to occupy space.
And why don't we get through the presentation and come back to that, because like, obviously, we're gonna have specific use questions, and I can think of a couple just on this slide. Why don't we get through it? Sounds good.
Sure. Great. And so, yeah, we can go through this chart, and again, I'll read aloud, so I know the font is very small. So, the proposals would be allowing, the small scale clean production facilities, like, the jewelry makers, apparel makers, those sorts of businesses, to locate in these areas and exist up to 10,000 square feet on the ground floor. This would also be affected by the modernized loading dock rules that we've previously discussed. Commercial uses would be able to occupy the same floor or the floors above residences and mixed-use buildings. But again, I really want to underscore that this is provided that there's a complete separation that exists between residential and non-residential parts of the building. And we can go into the Q&A. We have some slides that unpack specifically what I mean by that. The use groups will be simplified and modernized to provide greater clarity on where businesses can locate. These C4 through C6 districts are also areas where urban agriculture would be able to locate, assuming that they're fully enclosed, they're indoors. Bars and restaurants with entertainment that has a cover charge or a specified showtime could operate without capacity limitation, but are subject to the existing rules in place that requires them to be under 200, like a 200-person capacity if they're within 100 feet of a residence district.
So that's getting removed.
We can go into more depth on this proposal. It's admittedly perhaps the most complicated of all of the 18, both in terms of current zoning that we're looking to simplify. So I want to make sure we get back to your question now. I'll take a note of it.
Also experiential amusements, kind of like the virtual reality, those sorts of kind of like newer sorts of businesses would also be allowed. New design changes would ensure that buildings contribute to their surroundings. So this, we can get into this, but this is kind of streetscape related. And then this is also where I referenced earlier. So these designations for heavy and light kind of vehicle uses or like repair uses. So new light motor vehicle repair and maintenance shops would be allowed, so not heavy. But only after seeking approval from the BSA and establishing a site plan that contains their activity within the zoning law.
So that includes electric motorcycles.
That was,
It would not, happy to go into more detail on this. It's, motor vehicles as defined by the Department of Motor Vehicles.
Yeah, let's put it in that one. I think it's.
Yeah.
and lastly, micro distribution facilities would be allowed up to 5,000 square feet on the ground floor. And could be larger, in higher floors, I believe it's 10,000 on the chart. And so this would, the hope would be that it would encourage safer and more sustainable delivery methods than having double parked trucks all over the place, like taking up the sidewalk and blocking bike lanes. Next slide, please. We can transition to residential.
Just Southbridge Tower.
Yeah, exactly. So, as you're probably well aware, there's just a single residential district. It's an R8. It's occupied by Southbridge Towers. That would be affected by the CEO proposals. This would remove the 2-year clock for storefront vacancies for reoccupation. We kind of went over some of, kind of modernizing the rules surrounding home occupations and not having as, the same arbitrary distinctions between, why a barber could not exist, but a music teacher would be able to locate in those districts. It would also offer a new CPC authorization to allow up to 15,000 square feet of commercial space in existing or new construction within a large-scale residential campus. So this would allow residents to have greater access to basic necessities and allow, entrepreneurs to have new areas to locate their businesses. And lastly, it would offer a new CPC authorization to allow businesses to apply to create a new corner store. So again, this was primarily designed for lower density residential. This last thing that I'm just mentioning, lower density residential districts elsewhere in the city. So I imagine this has far less applicability to, this R8, for this corner stores. Yeah. Next slide, please. And this brings us to the manufacturing districts. So we went over proposals 4 and 6 in previous slides. So that was having to do with the loading dock restrictions or modernizing loading dock regulations and also simplifying the use group. So I'll just kind of skip those. We've already heard that. So those would also apply here. But something that I do not believe I've said yet is proposal 17 and its impacts. So businesses would be able to access a rationalized waiver process to seek zoning modifications through the BSA and CPC. And then lastly, 18. So this goes to, I did mention this, but I can restate it. So new types of commercial and manufacturing zoning districts could be added to our toolkit. So basically this would enable potential future rezonings. Again, this proposal has nothing to do with, this is purely a text amendment. So we're not specifying a geography to be rezoned, just allowing future rezonings. And this last proposal would not change anything existing, anything in existing districts. Again, it just is allowing for more flexibility in terms of rezonings down the road in the future. Next slide, please. And again, I will say that your point is very well taken about inclusion of locations like Governor's Island. Obviously, that is a special district. In the appendix slides of this presentation, the Governor's Island Special District is included. We can go to that at the end if you'd like. But on this slide, I'll just say that lastly, these proposals are meant to change underlying citywide zoning regulations. And so there are a few ways in which the proposal seeks to make our overlapping sets of rules for special purpose districts easier for businesses to understand. So some of these changes would consist of, one, aligning ground floor use rules when they're inconsistent with the stated purpose of the special district. And so essentially, we're making sure that in high-density commercial districts, that they permit the same rules, except when they're explicitly prohibited by the special districts.
And you'll be able to specifically tell us what you're talking about or which specific special purpose district in our community. Yeah, I mean, it's clearly, it's super complex to unpack the implications of like how it's all interwoven. I don't know if you have anything to add.
Not on the spot tonight, but we will get you that information.
We will definitely.
Yeah, that's correct.
City rule, whether it trumps the state rule, governance. City has its own terms for the rules.
It does. And
And so
so
does Governor
special
Tyler.
districts are intended to supersede underlying zoning. That's still going to be the case, whether that's a city district or a state district. But what we recognized in looking at the streetscape regulations, that oftentimes the special districts, which are, you think they would have better design rules than a not special district, but in fact, a lot of times we discover there are in fact no design rules whatsoever in some special districts, particularly lower Manhattan. So we took a look at that, and in places where there are no design rules today, we're having the underlying zoning of our streetscape regulations come into play, where the designated streets of the special districts are defined, those rules are kept in place. So we're keeping what makes the special district special and unique, while enhancing the design standards for places that are not designated.
And so we'll want to know how that looks in each special district for city one.
Ezra, Matt, you made a note of that?
Yep.
Yep.
Ready for your next slide?
Yes, please. And so, obviously, it goes without saying that there is a lot to unpack here. We fully acknowledge that. And so, in order to help you in, reviewing these proposals, we've created a checklist for the proposals, that would allow you to indicate specifically which parts of the text amendment you do and do not support, and specifically why. So this would be really helpful for us to kind of make sure that we're getting a nuanced view on what your thoughts are on this ZEO proposal. So if, for example, you disagree on, 2 of the 18 proposals, 3 of the 18 proposals, you'd still be able to vote through with conditions, but this checklist would allow us to like see specifically the components that you find most concerning and why. And so you can use this tool again, it's completely optional. Use it if it's helpful, don't use it if you don't find it helpful. You can use this as well as any other materials you prepare when you submit your recommendations to the LUP portal. We'll make sure that you have an up-to-date version of this checklist. I forget if I've already forwarded it, but if not, I will forward it tomorrow.
Thank you, that'd be great.
Yeah.
And I do like your optimism.
Yeah, I know,
You're very optimistic.
exactly.
How many more slides do we have?
We're just about wrapping up with this, and then we can transition into the Q&A. So again, tons of information up there. This is just for future reference. You'll have this slide deck. If you want to find specific parts of the ZR that are affected by the proposed changes, this is an easy kind of cheat sheet to know where to look for that. You can use that later on. I know the text is incredibly small here, so that's more of a future reference slide for you. Next slide, please. And then we're gonna conclude, at least in this section, with this one. So just kind of going over the roadmap for what's to come. The current 60-day referral period, as I said, is for community boards, borough presidents, and borough boards. And so this will officially end on January 8th. I know there is a discussion of, if there will be any timing kind of flexibility, but as of now, the official date is January 8th. There will be opportunities to add verbal testimony at the CPC public hearing, and additional written feedback can be submitted after that hearing for the CPC to consider. The process will culminate in a city council vote in the spring. And with that, I know we just bombarded you with a lot of information. I understand this is like, can feel overwhelming. So we can take as much time as you need to go into those appendix slides. We can identify the proposals that are, of greatest interest, and we can go and answer as many questions as we have time for. Or any questions that we don't have time for, because I imagine we could be here all night if we got into all of them. I would encourage you to, compile them and send them to us, myself, Ezra. We'll make sure that the ZEO team sees all those. We'll be able to get thorough answers on all of those written questions, because we will be coming back in December. And hopefully we'll be able to give very robust answers and thorough answers to whatever you send our way. In addition to what you're saying verbally, we'll take notes about what comes up in our conversation. And so, as I said, yeah, we'll be back in December. And I defer to you guys. If however you want to structure the Q&A, I want you guys to feel like you're in the driver's seat of where we go in terms of the issues. I think what could be helpful is just to, and again, you can go in a different direction, but what could be helpful is to identify the proposals that you're like, highest priority, we need to talk about this proposal, we need to talk about that proposal. We can go to those appendix slides. I can kind of give you more details. Hopefully, maybe some of your questions would be answered in that process, but if not, then we'll be here and we can have questions then.
Here's what I'd like to do. First, I have a preliminary process question about the timing before I get to that. I want to give members of the committee an opportunity for high-level questions.
Okay.
I don't want to get into the appendix
Sure.
stuff just yet.
Okay.
And committee members, that's because we have George here who's going to come on and help to sort of unpack this a little bit for us. And hopefully that might orient some of your questions. I know we have a lot of really smart people in the committee, and the detail of the questions I'm sure would be great, but we would be here all night if we went through everybody's very detailed questions.
Yeah.
So I don't want us to get bogged down in too much of that when we can sort of make our way there. But first, my process question for DCP is at least 32 cities, 59 community boards have signed on to a letter asking Chair Garodnick for additional time to review the proposal. Where do we stand on that? And is there a commitment from the Department of City Planning and from the Commission to afford that additional time, given that the revised zoning text, the original zoning text was 660 some pages, and the revised zoning text that was provided to us just a couple of weeks ago was over 1,100 pages, and you're volunteers.
Yeah, so I'm not privy to conversations about changing the timing of it all. I know that those discussions are being had, but I'm not able to share any more updates as of now. But it's fully noted that, you.
Yeah, we're discussing this internally right now. Matt W., unless you have anything else to share, like this has been something that's been heard loudly and clearly, and we will update you as soon as we have anything to update.
Make tonight and be very clear on that is that you have until the CPC votes on this to send in your recommendations. That's similar to carbon neutrality and anything else we're discussing internally. And we'll get back to you.
I appreciate that. I'm just going to repeat for the committee and for the public what I said in an email to all of you. Because now that we have our DM, I can be a little bit more forthright and direct and say, quite frankly, it's the same process to do a one-page text amendment as it is a 1,172-page text amendment. You have had years to work on this, teams and teams of paid people to work on this. It is completely unconscionable, almost to the point of burying community boards in paperwork, to expect a 60-day review period. And it is less than that when you have to deal with the schedules of the boards. So we are very appreciative that we had even a heads up that it was coming. We're very appreciative that you're here today. It's amazing. But my board basically has 30 days from today to absorb everything, pass a resolution, because that's what we have to do next month, and then have it ratified at the full board. it's almost unconscionable. January 8th does nothing for us. And quite frankly, I mean, I don't know any volunteer around this room that would rather say, gee, I don't need to spend time with my family for the holidays, for either Thanksgiving, Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, whatever it is. I'm gonna deep dive into the 1,100, almost 1,200 pages to try and understand something that's extraordinarily precedent setting and changing. When the first thing that communities screamed for and the mayor knew was affordable housing. So why this came before that, it's unconscionable. And I say that as a chair who puts in budget requests year after year for affordable housing. We understand that things are recovering from a pandemic. We understand all of that, and things will recover. We were at record highs before the pandemic, but business comes and business goes. We wanted to support small business. I don't remember anybody coming to the community board saying, hey, we want to road test these ideas. What do you think of this? That would have been really cool and very inclusive to the people who deal with the quality of life concerns. No, I don't see anything in here for small business tax programs. I don't see anything in here that makes it easier for small businesses to actually operate in the city. Finding a location is one thing. It's all about being able to operate in the city, which has become more difficult. So whether you change it to say something more modern versus something old fashioned, I don't care what the vernacular is. What I'm really looking for is a way to support small business.
Tammy, I just want to say, I hear you and everyone in this room who feels similarly. I hear you. That's part of why we're here tonight. Zoning isn't easy, and the intent of this proposal is to make it easier for businesses to understand it, because that is part of the cost of starting and operating a business. And today, if the zoning is unclear, you might have to hire George or another land use professional to understand what you can do. Our intent of this proposal is to make it easier to understand what you can do. And so that's the main intent of the proposal. Admittedly, the tools that we have as an agency are limited. We can't address taxes directly. What we can do is address the zoning barriers and work with organizations like the Downtown Alliance, with small business services and others who understand the other facets of what it's like to start and operate a business in the city. So yes, we hear you. This is not a complete solution to the challenges facing small businesses. We believe it's a very vital partial solution to those challenges. And the timing is critical for supporting those businesses. Now, timing for your review, we also know that it is a large number of pages. I want to hopefully assuage a couple of those concerns around that page length. It's still long. I don't want to diminish those concerns. But to go from 600 pages to 1,100 pages, that is because of special districts, of which you have 4 of the city's special districts, so we can help you focus on the changes in just those. So you don't need to look at special districts that don't pertain to you unless you care to. As far as the original, what was put onto our website in early October, that's relating to the underlying zoning. And even there, many of those pages, if you look, it's a bunch of strike-throughs, it's a bunch of underlines, and it's a bunch of annotations that say we're moving things from this section to that section. So many of those pages, some are actual changes, and we've noted where those changes are, and we have the slide on there to tell you exactly where those changes are for each of these 18 proposals. But the vast majority of those 600 pages are moving things around, making things easier, or updating literally tens of thousands of use terms that haven't been updated since 61.
Which is the literal definition of the amendment. And
Right,
that's
exactly.
easy to work through whether it's moved around or not. I'm not.
Right. So
When
I don't
now,
wish to
when do
commit
you
those
think that
concerns. I
there,
just wanted to,
when do you
provide
think there'll be a response from the chair or from the department about the majority of the community board's requests for additional review time?
I'm sorry.
When do you think there will
When
be
do I
a
think
response? And I'm saying that because the letter's requested at least 30 days. So if we don't find out for another 28 days, we'll look at something.
Yeah, you'll find out before that.
All right, let's, but let's go around for the committee members. And again, just if we could do sort of a high level pass now, keeping in mind that George is going to really help us get in there and dig into some of the details as we see we need to.
Yeah, the first thing I'd say is I would definitely like to put together a Q&A by the board that we could send directly to them, because I have lots of specific questions that no one wants to hear about right now.
Okay.
But my main question is,
I'm completely in favor of that, by the way.
Yeah,
We should
yeah,
have
We
plenty
are,
of time.
we are working on that. You need to send it to
Great.
Patrick, Laura, myself, Alice, and George.
because I'm biting at the tongue to ask some questions, but I won't. But my main question is, how are you engaging businesses?
Yeah, so these proposals, the start of the formal public review process was on October 30th.
Yep.
With the formal referral, but we've been working for well over a year and a half with business improvement districts like the Downtown Alliance, but also with business owners directly. So we started this process
Yep.
Back in middle of 2022 with a series of questions. These are things we heard through our zoning help desk,
Yep.
or things we'd identified in working with people who work in businesses
Yep.
before, and said, do we have these questions right? Are there other situations we've encountered? And from that, we started building a proposal. So we had 5 public information sessions, many members of the community board were on those, as well as people who work with businesses, and started to continue to iterate those proposals. So that was one work stream. The other, working with bids directly and talking to have them talk to their businesses. And then third, speaking with business owners directly through things like focus groups and trying to understand a little bit more, whether it's something like urban agriculture, people who want to do growing indoors, understanding more about those specific barriers. We held those as well with folks like the Mayor's Office of Urban Agriculture.
Does that include cannabis?
So yes, it would include cannabis, but only if you obtain a license from the state. And the thing I would add to that is that zoning does not and cannot regulate illegal activity. And so if you are selling cannabis today, there is nothing that zoning can do about the selling of cannabis in a retail storefront.
You said you surveyed businesses. Are those surveys public?
I did not say.
You did. You literally just said that. Okay.
I said focus groups.
Sorry, same thing from my mind. Are those focus groups public? Can we see them somewhere? Can we see the answers?
I believe at least in a couple of cases, we have recordings on our website.
Because I found one of the issues that we have here in the community board is that very often the businesses that we try and serve aren't nearly involved as they should be in the decisions that we're trying to make for them. So has there been like a large open hearing process for them to be involved, and can we help put that together?
Absolutely can help put that together. In fact, that's part of what the referral period is all about.
Alright.
These are not proposals that are set in stone.
Right.
And in fact, the whole point of the next 2 months is to get as much feedback as we can, or more.
Yep.
But get as much feedback as we can. And so if business owners say, actually, the zoning doesn't quite address what we need,
Right.
we want to hear that. Recognizing that business owners typically, when you interact with zoning, it's if you didn't know you weren't supposed to locate in a storefront, and then DOB comes knocking and says, you actually can't be here, here's a fine. So typically, in speaking with business owners, what we hear from them is, oh, zoning isn't a problem. They may not be aware of it in some cases, but in some cases they are. And so that's why we'd be welcoming to work with you and
I think they're responding that way because the problem is that they're drowning in taxes and regulation, but yeah,
Yeah.
okay. Thanks.
Next, Richard?
Yeah, I have a couple of high-level questions, too. So when you've gone through all of these, this analysis and these proposed changes, did you evaluate the impact of them in terms of economic activity, impact to small businesses here in our community? So what do you expect to see happen?
Yeah.
That economically will be changed, for good, for bad, what have you? That's my first question.
yeah, well, thanks for the question, Richard. So the whole intent of the proposals is to make it easier to find a place where you can locate as a business and be able to operate and grow that business if you wish to do so. And we think this will make it easier to fill vacant space. 22% vacancy rate that we found in October is the most recent of that data. It's hard to say exactly we will fill 200 of those 500 storefronts.
That's kind of what I was
can't-
asking, if you
can't
made
give
those
you-
estimates.
I can't give you a precise number, but what I can say is it will make it easier to do that by making the zoning itself easier to follow. Where today, let's say your axe throwing, or your example. There is no term in our zoning for axe throwing. You might have to go to DOB, spend 6 months getting a ZRD1 to clarify you can be, in fact, not in a commercial district whatsoever. And so that's an example of the type of business. I'm not saying you necessarily would desire to have an axe throwing business, but if one wanted to go in the district, it's very hard for them to know what they can do today, where they come up.
I just think it's genius that they put it together in a bar. I mean, there's no problems involved in that. I can't imagine the insurance licensing that happens there, but okay.
So just kind of to extend that question a little bit. Have you developed a set of criteria by which you would evaluate whether this is successful or not? And what are they? What are those?
So I think one of them would be clearly storefront vacancy. New York City has over 17,000 vacant storefronts, and we would define success as being able to see that vacancy number or percentage overall goes down. But it's not just storefronts, it's also office space, Lower Manhattan, 22 million square feet of vacant space. A lot of these proposals apply to commercial buildings above the ground floor as well. So if that axe throwing wanted to locate in a storefront space, they might be able to do so. But if that axe throwing wanted to occupy a vacant floor, let's say the 18th floor of an office block, they would be able to do that too. And so it's multi-dimensional, the way that we would define success. But overall, it's making it easier for businesses to fill empty space. That's the whole point of these proposals.
Okay, let me go to my second. So I may not understand these fully, but my sense is certainly that we're going to be seeing a lot more mixed use, residential, commercial, different activities going on the same floor or on a different floor. I don't quite know how that's going to work. There's clearly going to be much more interaction between types of activities. How will the quality of life impacts be monitored, policed? Who's responsible for that? How is that going to occur? Clearly today, it's not happening particularly well. How is this going to happen when I think the impacts are going to explode as a result of this? It's a pretty massive transformation of allowable activities within similar spaces.
That's a great question. So the majority of the proposals are focused on what you can do within existing commercial areas, commercial space. So storefront space, office space. And then there's a proposal in here that allows you to have residences and commercial uses potentially on the same level of a building or potentially on a level above residences. And so we crafted that proposal very carefully, looking at the potential for impact, particularly sound and noise impacts, because sound impacts and the potential for safety concerns are the two things we've heard the most in speaking with community members over the last year and a half on this
Well,
proposal.
you've got agribusiness, that's not only sound, that's chemical.
Exactly. So we want to make sure that we're avoiding any potential impacts between a commercial activity and a non-commercial activity. So for that proposal in particular, these where you're going to have commercial uses where they aren't allowed today, same level or above residences, they have to separate completely. And that's defined in the zoning by at least 15 feet, including 2 separate barriers, or they have to hire a sound engineer and they have to certify that they've attenuated that sound. So that's just on the sound. And as far as the potential for that business to interact with residences on the same floor, they also have to have separate entrances. That may include separate elevators if it's a building with elevators. We recognize that in existing buildings, this is a very high bar, but we think it's an important one to ensure quality of life. So I hope that addresses your question.
And policing, did you speak to that?
Sure. So like all zoning.
Enforcement, really.
Yeah, so like all zoning, department buildings is the main interpreter and enforcer of our zoning resolution. And so that can occur before occupancy itself, when a temporary certificate of occupancy or permanent C of O is issued. It can also take the form of violations, zoning violations, after the occupancy has occurred. And so it's the same processes where it would be today, where if something were occurring that were not to be for a business being a bad neighbor, let's say, then the main avenue is 311, and from there it gets escalated.
If you want transition to go further into that, to complement what Matt just said, there are slides in the appendix that do lay out for various proposals, some of the enforcement mechanisms. Maybe we can circle back to that later on. I want to get space for other people as well.
Anything else?
I'm along the same vein as.
I'm gonna defer to our wizard over here, George James, for more of the specific questions, and you did an incredible job. So, but I did want to just get a couple of things that Lauren covered here. Could you just tell us, when did this all begin? When did these three proposals begin under what, this administration or the prior?
So it's hard to give you a straight answer on all 18, because the honest truth is that some of these have been needed to happen for a long time. Our use changes have been out of date for decades, not just today. And so for that proposal in particular, it's been a long time coming, long overdue. Some of them we recognize even pre-pandemic, so last administration, that really things around storefront vacancy, the ways in which zoning might be interacting with storefront vacancy. These two different reports looking at corridor vacancy across a few dozen corridors and before the pandemic, and then immediately during the transformation that was happening in 2020. And then in some of these proposals, it's been more recent in response to what we've heard. So for example, the detail I was just going into around making sure that separation of different uses and that the sound attenuation, that was doing that in response to what we heard from the community as the main concerns they had around the basic idea of allowing buildings to adapt over time. So it's kind of all of the above. It's really been an iterative process. In some cases, it's been a long time. In some cases, it's fairly recent.
Is it fair to say it's primarily COVID driven? It's during that period and during previous administration this, or is it primarily, just curious, like, you know, what?
I would say the main
engine here, and I'm serious.
The impetus is really the pandemic and the massive disruption we saw to our economy during the pandemic. And what that reveals in many cases, businesses needed to be flexible, but zoning got in the way of that flexibility.
There was a question that came up at a group called the City Club, and it was very interesting about, I'm sure you're aware of it, it's a government group. You know, why aren't you taking this as an opportunity to just digitize the zoning text? In other words, make it into a clean document that's actually accessible to the citizens of the city. Has that been discussed or considered in this campaign with the city of Yes?
So I'd actually be very interested in hearing the exact context of that, because I was unaware of that. But what I can say is that our zoning resolution, yes, it's very complex and it's confusing and it's long, and it's very hard even for people like me as a planner to understand the thousands of pages, how a special district use regulations interact with the underlying zoning, but what if you're a type of business that appears in multiple use groups? And it's impossible in many cases for someone, if you're a small business, to figure it out on your own. So we want to address part of that. We're not going all the way, maybe is what you're suggesting, but we want
Well,
to,
it's definitely something that would,
You want-
yeah,
we want to move in that direction. So I'd love to hear
so
more.
that's a big picture thing.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm done. Thank you.
So. I can go last, you know, that's my preference as
That's
chair.
what I thought, so-
Please go. Yeah.
Thanks, Timmy. So are there other jurisdictions, municipalities that you're looking to that have done this on a smaller scale successfully or unsuccessfully? And what's the precedent and who are they?
Yeah, happy to share. So we rarely do this work in a vacuum, and it depends on the proposal. So for example, Baltimore recently instituted a makerspace proposal where they allow for small scale production, primarily food and what they define as artisan production. So this could be metalworking, this could be glass blowing, this could be a whole bunch of different things, and allow that in their commercial districts of unlimited scale. So notably, we have far more safeguards on our proposal than what we saw Baltimore enact recently. So that's one example for the makerspace proposal number 3. In other places, particularly around industrial, we were trying to look at what other cities are doing: Philadelphia, Seattle, even outside of the United States, Vancouver, London, Tokyo. and understand how the nature of industrial has shifted, particularly distribution and transportation. Because everyone is dealing with the transformation when it comes to deliveries and trying to understand how other cities are grappling with these same challenges was a big part of the work that went into this. And I encourage you, there's a 38-page project description or executive summary, if you will, of this proposal. And that's on our website, and it goes in a little bit more depth than what we're seeing.
So, I actually have a few high-level questions that I'm gonna bounce out. I have some detailed ones, but I'll try to forego those tonight, I guess. I'm not sure when I'll be able to ask them, maybe at the
Send them
committee
along
meeting
to
or
us.
something.
Yeah, again, we're gonna collate detailed specific questions that we can pass along.
All right, so let me try to remember some of these. I guess, so this January the 8th deadline, and then there's also a the planning commission will be voting. Do we know when that date is at this point?
We don't.
Would
have
that be
a firm-
February?
We do not have a firm date for the vote. I can say for certain, it's at least 2 weeks after January 8th, just based on the way the city planning commission's calendar works.
So 2 weeks after the public hearing, basically.
Correct.
Right,
Correct.
okay.
That's typically the minimum distance. With text amendments, it can be longer.
And the uses that you're talking about, is that included in the 1,100 pages at this point? A definition of every use that's being proposed and, because I mean, going through this, for example, like we discussed about light, just as an example, light motor vehicle repair, and already that in this small group that came up, what is that? So each of these definitions are defined pretty intricately.
So the zoning will either have what's called a zoning defined term. We use a symbol to say when it's a zoning defined term, or if there's no hash, it means it's just a term. A few things we're doing here to provide definitions. So current zoning, for the most part, does not define uses unless they have a hash, or for my generation, a hashtag. But it is something we're doing that is trying to make it easier for businesses as well as DOB and yourselves, is to use the North American Industry Classification System, or NAICS. So for retail services and manufacturing in particular, we've adopted a system of business classification that the federal government uses and updates every 5 years. This means that if you're a very narrow kind of manufacturing, you can know where you fall, where you nest within a broader subset of manufacturing. And so these definitions are defined. The federal government provides very detailed descriptions of the business activities, and it's a lot more than our zoning does today. So that's another example of where we're defining. So a third resource that's forthcoming, and hopefully in the next couple of days even, is a translation of each of the current uses to the future use term, whether that's a defined term or a just generalized term, under our new zoning, and then the inverse. So each of our new terms translated back to the existing uses. These are not part of the zoning itself, but it's something that George and others have asked for, and we're going through the very final stages. We want to make sure that we have it right before we release it into the public, so it should be later this week.
So one of the questions I wanted to ask, before we go to like the detailed questions of George, it's great to have noise concerns, that's a DEP regulated things. I'm in a building that was built post 1960s. But plumbing cannot handle commercial use in the building. I mean, you're lucky, with the way the pipes work, if your neighbor pours grease down the, or has long hair, my sink backs up, right? So I'm not in an ancient building, but I'm not in a modern building either. And there's a real concern because there doesn't seem to be in the stuff that I've seen, any kind of, one thing is sound is able to be fixed. Even with a separate entrance, a separate elevator, any way that you want to go there, if the infrastructure within the buildings do not support this, even if it's zoned. I mean, I specifically think of when I asked about agriculture and growing, right? That is beyond noise, that is obviously energy, that is lights, that contributes to light pollution depending on what lights are on. If it's not in a sunny spot. It'll have to have grow lights 20, running in the apartment. It also has to do with, the right to be able to have a quality of life in your apartment without the smell of either smoke or other things. I don't see anything in anything we presented, maybe the devil's in the details there, but I'd like to know what kind of qualifications and resources in the zoning are listed to ensure that.
Yeah, so gonna separate a couple of proposals that I heard you talk about. So urban agriculture, I think I heard you talk about home occupations as two separate related things.
But related, because you're talking about everything above ground police in
Right.
residential buildings.
So the way that the zoning treats,
I don't want a slaughterhouse above me, no.
and this proposal would not allow a slaughterhouse above you, the zoning.
No offense, I also don't want any kind of hair salon above me clogging the pipes. I don't want any kind of thing that's gonna have 50 people waiting in the lobby to be able to go up and down, because that affects our access to the elevators. How many people are in there? The size of the lobby. Egress and access.
Yeah, so a couple of things I'll say on home-based businesses. So our zoning today, section 12-10, defines a wide range of home occupations. Puts a lot of stipulations what a home-based occupation means. And the first part of it have to be a primary dwelling unit, not be someone who doesn't live in that dwelling unit. So you have to be residing in the dwelling unit that is your home occupation. And then the zoning also stipulates what it calls objectionable effects. These include noise, particulate matter, odor, sound, or other objectionable effects as defined by Department of Buildings, as being the trigger for violations of zoning, and also, and can, with working with building owners, violate leases. So that's how the zoning works today for home-based businesses. And that's in the underlying zoning that applies in every part of your district today. Now, the zoning also puts a few stipulations on the types of home-based businesses. So you can be a lawyer, you can be a music teacher, you can have people going up to your residence today in our zoning. And so long as the building doesn't put additional stipulations on that, you can do that activity. That's been around since 61. In addition, since 1981, both the Tribeca Special District and the residential conversions under Article 1, Chapter 5 for all of Lower Manhattan. They do several other things, which we are bringing the rest of our zoning up to where the special districts already are. So those things, it excludes that list. So you can have barbers in Tribeca today. You can have barbers in a residential conversion, Article 1, Chapter 5. Other things that those special districts do, you can have up to 3 employees. That's allowed in Tribeca and Article 1, Chapter 5. We'll bring that to the rest of the.
This is in a home-based business.
In a home-based business, and it's allowed today since 1981. Other things that it does, you can have up to 49% of your dwelling unit be with a home-based business. That's in the special district for Tribeca. That's in the special district for Article 1, Chapter 5. So the gist of what we're doing for the home-based businesses proposal is taking what we've seen in special districts, including 2 that apply to your jurisdiction, and we're updating the rest of the underlying zoning to be matching what we've seen without notable concerns from places where that's already allowed.
So I have a really strange question that I've been thinking about since COVID and since people are not going back to offices as much and there's working from home, and this may not even be a zoning related thing as much as it is probably policy and tax, but it sounds as though the small business is still getting screwed, excuse me, whereas these corporations are still getting off scot-free because everybody's working from home, nobody's going to an office, they're not paying taxes, we're not getting the tax benefits from working from home in particular. How is this being addressed?
I'm not sure that I follow. I'm sorry.
Well, like, for example, I work from home. I don't have to apply for a home occupancy permit at that point. But at the same time, I get 0 tax advantages for working from home. And the corporation, I love my company, but they're looking at it, they're you know, I don't have the dialogue with them, but any of the corporations are looking at it saying, hey, we're saving money left and right.
Right. Yeah,
So the little guy's still getting screwed.
right, so the tax policy is based on the place of employment, which is true for all of us as city employees, it's true for anyone who has a place of employment, the taxes are based on that. Genie's out of the bottle when it comes to work from home, is what I think I would say, because we're not going to see us returning to 5 days a week in the office, we're just not.
Right.
That's true for the city, it's true for
Right.
private employers. What the zoning needs to do is be able to adapt to that reality and make it easier for you if you want to have, say, a PR business or a stockbroker. Today, explicitly prohibited in the zoning for you to do that from your home.
Okay, I want to draw George in the conversation and try to shepherd us along. We're 5 minutes of 8 now. I know this is a big topic, so I'm not trying to rush through it best, but we could be here till 3 in the morning.
Yes.
Slide through it. So George, can I just turn over to you to maybe sort of walk through the big areas we've identified as it relates to Community District 1. And George is working on some work product for us that will help us really sort of get through this. Right?
Good to meet everybody. I have worked with Tammy in this board before, but I wanted to do faces in this room. So I do a lot of zoning work, right? And I've reviewed a lot of things. I've talked with Matt about this and reviewed lots of different proposals before. And so I'm going to start just by the big picture. This is like a really big deal, right? The whole idea of changing uses, the way that is being proposed here is radical, frankly, from a Euclidean zoning standpoint. And by that, I mean, essentially, the idea of separating uses, for the most part, we're eliminating a lot of that. So big thing that we talk about is production uses. So in Euclidean zoning, where we separate uses, is we have manufacturing zones where we have all kinds of production uses. And right now, we've been talking about bakeries and brew pubs, but essentially, all of these, or not all, but many production uses go into any commercial district. So, you know, furniture manufacturing, machinery, metal fabrication. You could take a building, like one of these big office buildings in the C6 districts, and actually occupy it with production uses. I don't know if that's gonna happen, but I'm just saying it's gonna be possible. And I bring it up here for this district because in 2010, there was a big rezoning in this district that got rid of almost all the manufacturing in this district in the 2010 rezoning. And essentially, you know, in that report, it was saying that, look, the neighborhood is becoming increasingly residential with neighborhood commercial. And so essentially there was an action taken by the city to discourage and prohibit the expansion of production uses in this district. And what that does is this is going to turn it on its head, is that production uses will be allowed in every commercial district, every one. And because you don't have C1 and C2, you're all C4 and C6, it's unlimited size above the ground floor. And even on the ground floor, it's 10,000 square feet, but that's only per establishment. So you could have multiple establishments. And so it's not, so production is something to worry about when you think about neighborhood vitality in commercial streets, because a lot of these production uses, if they're not geared towards the neighbors, they can be really deadening to your vitality of your commercial street. Now, I don't think that's necessarily going to happen.
Can you explain that?
Sure. So you like to see people on commercial streets going from store to store. It's activity on the street. Different small businesses sometimes get customers going to 2 different stores or 3 different stores. If you have somebody bending metal in the middle of that, right, serving some other client out of state and not dealing with local uses, it's not a neighborhood commercial use. And so it doesn't depend upon local people to provide it. And so I don't know if that's necessarily going to happen in your district. I think that's definitely going to happen in the Bronx, and where you have these really marginal commercial districts where they can only get dollar stores. And suddenly you have all of this space that can be occupied. I think what you're more likely to see here is the changes in amusements, dancing, and, you know, essentially eating and drinking, what I would call nightclubs. Let's just call them nightclubs. It's really hard to locate a nightclub in New York City. And these rules will change that. It'll make it much, much easier. It's really hard to locate amusements like Coney Island style rides, right? Coney Island style rides exist on Coney Island for a reason, because that's the only place they're allowed, basically. And essentially what this is going to do in this district specifically, it's going to open up the big office buildings with lots of vacancies to essentially anything that would want to locate here can locate there. Basically, I mean, there's some, you know, I'm maybe overstating it a little bit. Yes, you can't do a slaughterhouse. No slaughterhouses permitted, but most production uses and most commercial uses will be able to occupy a C district, and, you know, C4 through C6. And, you know, I was speculating on this, is that, you know, it's a very big change, and it really is, it has the potential to affect the future of downtown. Like, is downtown a business center? Is downtown an entertainment district? And I've seen this happen in many other cities in this country. There's been this debate about what is your central business district? Is it a place where business happens, or is it a place where entertainment happens? And in many, many cities that have transitioned, where you have stadiums and entertainment essentially displacing or competing with your standard office uses. And, you know, there was a planning opportunity here, a year-long planning opportunity that was never undertaken, at least that I saw, of visioning for what the future of the business districts are. And this is like an implementation of a vision for a entertainment-oriented, or at least supplemented, business district. And it seems to be, and that may be right. That may be the right thing to do. If your focus is trying to tenant up buildings, like that's the most important thing you want to do, is find tenants to those buildings. Well, you just opened up the phone book and said, everybody can come. And is that a good thing or not? I don't know. Honestly, I don't know, but that's a question that you all should have weighed in on, I think. It's my humble opinion.
It sounds like you're saying this is a reactionary zoning rather than a visionary zoning to some degree.
Well, you know, it may be somebody's vision, but it didn't include you all, right? And that's, you know, so, you know, I think back to Governor's Island. When we looked at Governor's Island, if you remember, the original zoning had use group 15 in it, which is Coney Island style. The idea was, at the time, when we first saw the first draft, was that Governor's Island could turn into Coney Island or Colonial Williamsburg or whatever. And that was taken out eventually, but somebody's been talking about this, right? That's the kind of thing that we look at and we go, oh yeah, you know, they try things out on the special districts, right? Because once you try it out in the special district, you can expand it citywide after a while. Or at least that's the strategy. So my point is that, yeah, somebody's been thinking about this. It's not necessarily just happening because of, you know, high vacancies and COVID. I don't know who those people are, though. I'm not part of those discussions.
Neither were we. Do you have specific questions that you can ask?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And if you want to, like, if I got something wrong, you know, you'll correct me, because there's a lot of pages here and I get things wrong. Okay. So I do want to talk about the objectionable effects, right? For uses in buildings, and noise. So one of the things that can happen is you can have rooftop uses, rooftop commercial uses, rooftops over residences. My understanding is that, if they're restaurants and bars, it can be unenclosed.
So you could have a restaurant or a bar.
Yep.
Above offices today, unenclosed.
Yep.
That could be true in any office building today in Lower Manhattan. I just want to establish that first. What you could do as a result of this proposal is you could have eating or drinking establishment above residences primarily enclosed with accessory unenclosed space. That's true of eating and drinking today. But what this proposal does that it doesn't do for office buildings or hotels is provide an additional buffer. So that 15-foot buffer applies vertically as well as horizontally. And what that means is you have to have a non-noise generating use or part of a use separating the residential from the non-residential uses. So that could be a kitchen, that could be an office, that could be storage, that could be something, so long as in the C of O, DOB can clearly see that will not generate noise. So that's a little bit about what the proposal does for that specific instance and what the zoning allows.
Is there concern about, in mixed buildings? So in mixed buildings, you have this ordering, right? You have commercial at the bottom, residences above. That's the way it works now. And the idea that you can have now commercial on the rooftops, commercial on the same floors, as long as they have different entrances, which is not so difficult in Lower Manhattan because you have a lot of these big buildings with multiple elevator banks, which could be definitely, segmented instead of horizontally, it could be vertically. It could happen.
So for the residential terrace, so let's just say you're in a building in Tribeca and the top floor has an outdoor terrace. You're saying that not only could the commercial on the ground floor be, for example, entertainment or food and beverage, but that above all the buildings, the rooftop apartment could also be then turned into a commercial space.
I think what I'm saying is that what you described could happen in an office building today. But it
No,
could,
I'm saying a residential building.
Right.
It's a mixed-use
Yes.
residential.
so it could not happen in a residential building today. It could happen in an office building today. And what this proposal would allow is for the possibility of that to occur in a residential building, provided that separation or attenuation occurs.
If they have the entire floor of the top with the roof deck, there's no resident left or right, is that considered a 15-foot?
No.
Or is there 15-foot below it as well?
As well.
So they would have to own the top 2 floors and only do quiet work on the floor below it.
That's correct. That's correct. Which is likely why you would only see this in new construction for the most part. And in fact, these rules exist in East Midtown. And where we've seen this occur is in new construction only.
There's something in there about assemblies. If you have to get a DOB assembly and there's a certain number, there's a.
Right.
Right. Remind me what that is.
Yeah, thank you for, there's the 1-hour version of each presentation of proposals, and then there's more detail. So on this one, the separation is required when you have when Department of Buildings would deem you as needing a place of assembly certificate of occupancy. So that's 75 people and above. That includes to any bar or restaurant. That includes to, if you want to do an event space, a wedding venue, scaffold.
75 people or above if it's enclosed, 200 if it's unenclosed.
I would have to go back to you on that.
Yeah, I think it's 200 if it's unenclosed. All right, so, and if it's a smaller space, like if we're talking about like a small Tribeca building, which there are many small footprint buildings, and these are buildings that were built for non-residential uses for the most part. If you had an occupancy of less than 75, you would not need it would not qualify for the separation.
I would challenge the notion that you could do that economically, that you could have.
Oh, and it's not about challenging the notion economically, it's just whether you permit it. I mean, that's,
Right.
listen, if people are not gonna do it, well, then why allow it?
Right.
Right, I mean, you could just say that use requires it and not have this requirement that it has an occupancy of 75 or more. Right? You could just say the use requires it, which is what zoning normally is, right? And that might be, listen, I think the noise situation, especially in Lower Manhattan, in Greenwich Village, in East Village, I mean, it's a big deal now for a lot of the neighborhoods especially because of the open restaurant. Because in the very, very narrow streets where you have these uses, it's caused a lot of conflict in certain neighborhoods. In other neighborhoods, it's fine, right? And this all has to do with the context of the neighborhood. And so if we start putting these uses up on the roof, especially when, 49% of it could be open, I just see my phone ringing more, with a lot of complaints about, bars and restaurants and roofs and, people who, if the great thing about, you can say that the commercial uses happening down low segregates the uses that create noise and have objectionable effects from where people live. And, granted, if you live on the second floor, that's to you, but if you're on the top floor, you don't have to deal with those so much, right? And this is really changing, right? This changes that concept.
It changes the concept if you're new construction. So taking your example of, say, 3-4 story building, maybe Stone Street, just to pick a street where there's a lot of food and beverage. Got a bunch of bars on the ground floor, but these are old buildings. Chances are you're not going to meet the requirements of this proposal. You need a separate entrance all the way to the top. You need to be able to have 15-foot separation below. And that's just not going to be feasible.
There's a lot of buildings have regular entrances and service entrances. And you can redo your service entrance, so that's your commercial entrance, and you can have your regular entrance be your residential entrance. I mean, that's common. It's not uncommon. And it's something that, yeah, granted, you don't see that in the walk-up, but, in Lower Manhattan, you have a lot of older elevator buildings in that kind of format. So I think it's something that I can see the potential for a lot of conflicts with residents, right? It seems like there's a lot of focus on filling spaces that landlords need filled, right? Landlords, there's a lot of issues with vacancies, right? We have all these vacancies, so we have to find more potential tenants to fill up those spaces. I'm going to say something radical. I'm not an economics guy at all. I don't even pretend to be. But if they lowered rents, would vacancies go down?
Yes.
I just, I throw that out there as a potential, if somebody took out a $1 billion loan for some grand building, and then they, have to have these rents, or otherwise they go broke. Why should that matter to people here? Right?
I think we're seeing some of that sort of play out with some of the work that the BID's doing, where they're working with getting these temporary spaces put up at presumably below market rents. Free, exactly. So there are ways to activate space not at the market price. But what this proposal does is make it easier to fill that empty space if you're a business. And you know what? That's great for residents too, as well as people who are going for offices in the area.
Can we go to some more specific questions, George, that you have, and because what we do?
Yeah. You'll tell me when to stop, right?
We've got a whole list. I'd like to get like some real solid answers.
Okay.
For the committee.
Yes, okay, so,
Can we get a copy of it?
do you worry about the competition between commercial and industrial use and residential use? The city thinks that, or many people think that there's a housing crisis.
Yeah.
And that a lot of the buildings, a lot of the spaces that we're talking about could be residential spaces, right? There's a lot of things in here in terms of grandfathering uses, but especially in the commercial buildings, commercial office buildings. You worry that by allowing all these different tenants to occupy those spaces, that that you're actually competing with the residential use, because all of these uses could, in theory anyway, be converted into residential.
Right. I don't worry about that, George, and here's why.
Yeah.
Because we have an affordable housing crisis.
Yeah.
And housing is going to be the predominant driver, at least as far as we can tell, of new development. Where that may be, there may be some instances where it is new industrial
What's not gonna
development.
happen in this district?
Yeah, we have very little opportunity for new development here.
Right.
And the new development that we have coming is office conversions, which have no affordable housing requirement or tax incentive for it. So let's take that off the table. That's the largest bulk that we will see, other than 5 World Trade, which the community board and the affordability teams fought tooth and nail to get to. Right, so we have, 33% in that building, unbelievable. We hope to God it still goes through, right? Beyond that, there aren't a lot of new. What we're looking at is the potential, and this is what I don't understand, is why we would want to take out residential housing when we have a housing crisis, and housing is right now, according to the Downtown Alliance, in their bid district, that is the most successful part of the market other than Class A office space right now with rents. Why would we want to take that out? Well,
So
a
not every,
commercial operator will pay more than a residential operator will for the same space. Dollar per square foot, potentially, on a rooftop in a residential neighborhood. It doesn't seem to me to do anything to help our housing crisis by taking housing stock off the market, therefore pushing the price of the reduced stock further up.
22 million square feet of vacant office space as of the most recent data, quoting your numbers. Not all 22 million square feet is feasible to convert to residential, even at market rate. In fact, the vast majority is not feasible to convert to residential. So the premise that all 22 million square feet is potential housing is unfortunately not true. So there is a large subset of that 22 million square feet that through this proposal will be able to more easily convert to non-office, commercial and light industrial uses. That does not take away the potential of housing. In fact, they're complementary to a district that has a growing population that needs more services, needs more entertainment, yes, needs more experiential retail, and needs more of what it needs to be a complete community. So I would challenge the notion that this is competition with housing. It's not. It's complementary.
I'm sorry, I would love to weigh in. Yes, possible on some of this. I think you're 100% right. There is a substantial portion of the older office stock in Lower Manhattan that just cannot and will not convert to residential. I don't think it's entirely accurate to say that it is a sort of zero-sum game between finding different commercial uses and residential space. If you look at a building like, for example, 55 Water, thank God is almost fully leased at the moment. Those floor plates are 60 to 63,000 square feet, right? That's almost 2 acres for individual floor plate. The process of trying to convert a building like that, if that building was vacant, it would almost be more economically efficient to tear it down and rebuild new ground floor, new residential development from the ground up, than to convert that building as existing floor plates to residential. And I do, with all due respect, sir, I have to push back strongly on your assertion that we can just let these buildings stay vacant. I feel very, very strongly that that is not in the interest of the city. It's not in the interest of this community to have these buildings vacant. If we care about supporting our small businesses and the existing small businesses in the neighborhood, having active uses in these buildings and thinking creatively about what the future of those buildings look like is absolutely critical. And I think you're right. And it's an interesting idea about what's the vision for the neighborhood? What is the vision?
Yeah.
Right. I can't answer that. You can't answer that. Nobody can answer that. We can get 10 of the absolute smartest, most experienced retail and office experts you can think of in this room, and they will give you 20 completely and totally contradictory visions of what the office market and the retail market will look like 5 years from now, 10 years from now. And I think everybody has to remember that we are at a moment of absolutely unprecedented uncertainty. We're looking at the impact of hybrid work. We're looking at a whole bunch of secular and macroeconomic changes that are radical, that are reshaping the office market and reshaping the retail market. And how that's all going to play out and what that's going to look like 5 years from now or 10 years from now is beyond any of us to figure out. You can look, I mean, there's been
No, no, the city has within its control to make it a lot easier, again, from a regulatory and tax and possibility to attract more businesses, but they continue to tax and regulate companies out of existence.
I will.
If the city tomorrow made a new business district downtown saying, if you had your people here 5 days a week, we'll give you a tax incentive or additional payroll tax break, then you'll see those offices fill up awfully fast. So I would check
And
that.
tax policy is
That was the easy answer too, but it's, you know.
And I agree with that. And tax policy is a huge driver of the challenge we're
Putting
facing.
businesses out of business, it's not.
But sir, if you think about a business
It's not
right
a
now,
factory, it's
if you
policy.
think about a small business that is trying to navigate all the changes that they're seeing coming out of COVID, that is saying.
That's me, I
we've been-
registered in Millbury.
Right, and that's saying we've been serving a 9 to 5 office population for 10 years, for 20 years, and that office population isn't here anymore, or it's not here in the same density and the same times that it was in 2018 and 2019. And you're thinking, can I add in, you know, a comedy performance on a Wednesday night to get people into their business? Can I add in some other sort of service or do something a little bit different? Can I start manufacturing? I'm selling cookies that people like. Can I manufacture them on a small scale and sell them? They can't do that right now. And the worst and most tragic part is, and you're 100% right, 95% of the businesses that we deal with at the Alliance on a daily basis have never heard of the zoning resolution. They're gonna hear about the zoning resolution, and when they start selling those cookies,
And last one
and
for me on
DOE
this.
comes in and hits them with a $5,000 fine.
And I swear on the last word for you on this, but this to me, I'm really interested in learning more about it. I'm eager to get that Q&A going. But to me, this is a Band-Aid until the city recognizes what it's doing to businesses. And this is the city trying to say, well, we realize that we're overtaxing them, we realize that we're overregulating them, but here's one little gift to make it a little easier. This doesn't matter to 95% of businesses in New York City.
So, all right, so let me, hang on, let me reclaim the floor for a second.
Like,
Colin, hang on.
Hey, what?
Let me, wait, God,
have you
wait.
seen my?
Need to explain the conversation, Colin, please.
Yeah.
Let me reclaim the conversation for just a couple of minutes. We are veering to a really great animated debate. And the most animated I've ever seen Jeff Ackwood. But I want to get back to George's specific questions. Before we do that, I want to recognize Justine on the online portion to ask her question, and then we'll come back to George's pointed questions. And I do want to wrap this up in the next 15 minutes or so. We'll come out of here with two specific things. One, some commitments to each other as to how we're going to ask and posit specific questions from the committee members to the Department of City Planning, how we're going to manage that, and then two, what we can expect out of our next meeting, how we're going to carry it forward with George. So, Justine?
Thanks so much, Patrick. I'll be quick. So my first question is just for clarification purposes. At this point in time, you're saying that the zoning would only affect new businesses or new buildings being built. And my question is, and maybe it goes to what George said.
No.
No, it covers everything.
Correct.
And in that case, I ask you, how is it that any building that's having any kind of financial troubles or struggles is going to move people and turn residential properties into commercial properties, and therefore further reduce the amount of residential properties that are available, thereby further increasing the cost of housing, whether it's to own or to rent in Manhattan, in the area, especially lower Manhattan. And all this stuff, these ideas to you want to have recreation, you want to have cabarets, nightclubs. Who is going to work there?
And who is going to live in the area to frequent these places when it is too darn expensive to live within 2 hours of a commute to Manhattan? You guys are putting the cart before the horse.
Could I say one quick thing? I just want to reiterate, and I think this is something that I was at the CD11 meeting earlier, and I think you voiced a similar concern about like kind of commercial uses in buildings kind of outcompeting residential uses. I think it's worth reiterating that this is one of 3 citywide text amendment proposals with City of Yes. And the last one that is like, will be gaining traction soon is specifically about housing opportunity and increasing housing production citywide. So I think like we can't be looking at this purely in a vacuum and saying that, that there are really ambitious proposals that are being proposed in order to increase housing production. So it's like, we can't just be having this conversation about housing supply without acknowledging that there's a lot of.
We're stuck in one chamber of that vacuum right now. We unfortunately don't have insight into that, so.
Yeah, we do. Thank you, Patrick, for saying that, because my answer to you is that people cannot afford to live in Lower Manhattan. People are being forced out in droves, and you're not addressing that. And your city, to be fair, what I'm hearing today is not addressing that. And building affordable housing elsewhere is not going to address affordable housing in Lower Manhattan. Thank you.
Thanks, Justine. Yeah, all right, George, I know, I think you have a litany of specific questions.
Well,
I'm not sure how best to approach that.
Yes, I'll keep going until you tell me to stop.
If we could do maybe like 15 minutes of.
Yeah,
okay. It's 10 to 6.
Concise.
Well, but one thing I do have to say about just following up this, all right, is about residential uses and residential conversion, because this is a complicated issue, right? Is that zoning, the C zoning permits residential uses. There's nothing that you can mix residential and commercial uses. There are just rules on where they can locate. So in theory, you can convert these office buildings, but in practice, it's very difficult for many of them because they have very, very big floor plates, as you were saying. And in New York City, you need to have windows, right? And so you can't have very, this.
Let's go through the.
So I just thought it's important it's complicated, I guess, is the issue. Okay, so home occupation, if I may, recognizing that there are home occupations, essentially special districts with generally these rules. But so that
Exactly these rules, the exact same rules.
Okay, all right. But in other places, but these rules apply in Tribeca and in converted buildings, in buildings that were at one point, for the most part, commercial buildings, right? Where there are a lot of commercial activities, either historically or even currently, right? That's the nature of this, is that those districts aren't so residential, so they can have more of the, more employees in their spaces than they would in a regular residential building. And I just want to make certain that folks understand, it's increasing the number of employees there from 1 to 3. The size of the business in the home can go from 25% to 49%. And there used to be they want to eliminate the 500 square foot maximum size. So if you have a very large apartment, you can have a very, a substantial amount of space devoted to this.
So if there's a 3,000 square foot apartment, you could have 49% of it
Yes,
be commercial use.
right. And 3 outside employees coming.
And no limitations in terms of what type of business or number of people that are coming. So my then question that follows with this logic is, what kind of traffic impacts have been considered on this kind of a chain? Because a traffic impact, especially in a residential block and some of our historic streets, adding more commercial in upper floors in residential buildings has an impact also for the problems that we already have with lack of availability for, there's only so much square footage on our streets. Our sidewalks are narrow. There's some of the smallest sidewalks in the entire city. So what impact on traffic was considered, if any, with these?
So something I want to make sure that is clear with this. Currently with the zoning, you have 25% of your dwelling unit, the residential are up to 500 square feet. Yep. And if you are in, say, a studio apartment that is around 500, 600 square feet, your size is pretty small. And many of the units in Lower Manhattan, where the rents are higher, are these smaller units. You don't see a lot of 3,000 square foot units in Lower Manhattan. Challenge me if I'm wrong about something. Right, where you can already do all of this. So the places where you can't already do all of this are much smaller units, where the rules, in some cases, how do you define in a studio apartment what 25% is going to be for home business?
Same,
How
how
do
do
you-
49%.
It's
So-
not, I mean, the percentage doesn't make a difference. You're carving out, all you have to do is provide, whether it's a demi wall or a desk, it doesn't make a difference. It's easily definable. And I think using 500 square feet limits the potential for what we're talking about for instance. Right. If you want to think of the average size apartment of closer to 1,000 or more square feet around, if it's a family, et cetera, 900, 1,000, then you're talking 500 square feet for commercial use and 500 square feet so you're potentially taking out a one-bedroom apartment off the chain from being a family who lives there to turn it to a mostly commercial, because instead of having a family.
Not mostly commercial, still has to be accessory to the dwelling.
Understood, but you're gonna have a single person who lives there running a commercial business versus a family. Because I'm looking at the long-term change of what's happened down to school enrollment, right? When you diminish the capacity of residents, and we went from rental to condos and co-ops, I'll use Battery Park City as an example of that. Enrollment dropped in all the local schools that had been overcrowded and overdone because you reduced the amount of residential housing that was in the zones. So I'm looking and saying, 25 to 50 sounds great if it's me and 3 others, but then maybe the next renter who comes in is a one-bedroom, that's not a family, it's a one-bedroom running a business for a single individual.
What I would say on this is that there's a reason why these are not the zoning rules themselves. The reason we have these proposals as referred is to have conversations like this, to get your feedback, and to have the city planning commission as well as ourselves consider the wide variety of cases that may apply in different neighborhoods. So Tammy, I welcome specific feedback from the community board on this proposal in the situations you outlined. I think you make a valid case for considering smaller versus larger units, thinking about bedroom sizes, thinking about different ways in which we can address the ways in which these zoning proposals may be inhibiting small units, while making sure that we wouldn't inadvertently do anything that could impact family sustaining units in the district. So
Can you
I
talk about
welcome your.
streetscapes for a little bit and how your streetscape zoning proposal goes hand in hand with historic districts?
Sure.
Landmark districts and open dining.
Yeah, so we've talked to LPC about this.
Mhm.
So LPC rules, as they do today, they supersede. As it relates to outdoor dining, that is not part of this proposal.
But outdoor dining is a major factor on the streetscape. Yeah.
And it's not part of this proposal.
So what studies have you done that look at the streetscape proposals that you have that then take into account the open dining?
I think you'd have to be a little more specific, I'm sorry.
So there are rules that have been promulgated by DOT, and they're having a hearing in 8 days about their rules. Have you looked at those rules in relationship, or that will govern outdoor dining, where everything's set up, rules regarding, location on the street, regarding obstruction? Have you looked at your streetscape rules, thinking about DOT rules regarding the siting of?
So I personally have not. But what I can say is that the zoning rules are not meant to be in conflict with what DOT is providing. And fundamentally, they address separate things. There's a little bit of overlap, of course, which was addressed through zoning changes a couple of years ago. But those are not part of this proposal. They were not considered as part of this proposal. We're not proposing any changes there.
But you'll tell us because I believe it said that the new streetscape regulations apply to special commercial districts and streetscape regulations in special districts, which we have, right? So they remove and replace the standard streetscape provision. So I guess one of the other things that goes in with the conversations about dark stores that, for example, Downtown Alliance is doing such a great job with. When you talk about commercial distribution centers and production facilities, how does that prevent dark stores?
Yeah.
Because those are not accessible to the public.
Yeah, so
And
forgive
with
me.
with the new street rules that were proposed to allow the cargo bikes to load and unload on sidewalks. How does that work now with streetscape and the intervision?
So on transparency, the transparency rules you have in the special district only apply, I believe, to designated streets. And this is where I have to think about the entire city as well as dozens and dozens of special districts, so please correct me. You know your special district better than I do, but transparency only applies to designated streets, correct?
You're the DCP expert on.
So we'll get back to you on that, but if that is the case, and I believe it is, then on the streets where they are not designated, there is no minimum transparency rule. And that means that you can have a fully non-transparent surface along the street wall. What this proposal would do is provide a minimum 50% transparency, just like you have in those designated streets, but along the corridors that are not specially designated, thereby enhancing the character and nature of those streets.
Streetscapes are not just transparency.
They're not, it's responding to the dark store question.
All right. I want, just to follow up on that, the streetscape part of this, it's extensive, right? You have these tier A, B, C streets, you have new terms like, blocks across the street. I forget, you actually gave it the special, the custom name. It's complicated. It's complicated. I'm going through this and I'm going, this is hard. I would really love to see some diagrams.
Yeah.
And is that something that you could provide?
Yes.
Will you provide diagrams?
We
like
have those. We have those in the appendix to the slides that Matt sent over.
Okay, all right. I think they would be extraordinarily helpful because urban design and streetscapes are best shown in pictures, not text.
I agree. I'm not a designer myself, so I
Neither am I.
Let me interject on the slides for just a moment. I've asked Zach and the office staff to send that slide deck that was here tonight, because there's a lot of information back in an appendix that city planning has officially provided. Let that be sent around to all the committee members, as well as an announcement about we're gonna ask that by the 27th of November, which is the Monday after Thanksgiving, so you can start thinking about this, to come back with your specific questions, and we'll collate those. That gives us enough time to pose them to DCP to intelligently get back to us before our December 11th meeting, which is the next time we're gonna be talking about this. And to the extent we don't get to it in the next few minutes, because again, I do want to wrap this up, let's say in the next 7 minutes, George.
Okay.
If George still has specific questions, we'll include those as well. So George, carry on.
Yeah, you know, one thing I do want to talk about is linking the first city of yes with the second city of yes. I know I went to, you explained how rooftop spaces were at a premium, that we needed rooftop spaces for solar panels and we needed extra mechanicals to go up on the rooftop. We increased the size of the obstructions by over 100% on the rooftops. It's pretty astounding in terms of the volume that we can now put up on our rooftops for these things that are necessary for local law 97, local, you know, all the local laws that are requiring this. So why do we want commercial uses on rooftops in buildings where it's now prohibited?
So Jordan, what I would say is that these proposals, they're not in conflict. with one another. And just because you allow something doesn't mean you're gonna see.
Don't we want,
That defies what the mayor says of build it and they will come. That's completely defies what the mayor's proposals of City of Yes is. His marketing point is we're doing all this so they do come. So,
But back to the specific question of why is it a good idea?
So let's take your hypothetical of you can have solar panels or you can have a restaurant, but you can't have both. You can't have solar panels on top of the restaurant that's enclosed. These proposals are not in conflict, George. They're not in conflict with housing, and they're certainly not in conflict with sustainability.
Yeah, I'm sure we agree, because I would say that that did come to my mind as well, with the sustainability issue on the roof. If it's what I can't remember, it's almost 90% could be covered in solar panels. You have a roof, I mean, you have a certain budget here, so you're saying you would just build a new story? If you would have one roof on an existing building? Yes, but you would need 2 floors presumably, because you have the 15 feet that you would need, so you have to have an extremely high space. I mean, it just seems you have to do a lot of machinations to get that restaurant.
I mean, it's not so difficult to imagine solar panels going on top of roofs and any jurisdiction in any
That was,
density or height. And what the proposal would do is in combination of allowing for what carbon neutrality allows for more solar in more locations, for example, battery storage in more locations, other ways in which we are helping to green our buildings. What happens within space does not define what happens on top of that space that's enclosed.
That's a good question. I was gonna ask you about that. How does your proposal jive with the FDNY's feeling on battery storage in basements for buildings?
Not part of this proposal,
Okay.
but City of Yes for carbon neutrality has a lot, and the community board here, I believe, I actually don't know how you all voted on carbon neutrality and the question of battery storage. You approved it, okay.
can you elaborate on why the city doesn't feel that they need to do a DEIS when it comes to the uses that are now going to be generated, the increase in the impacts with noise?
Yeah, so we looked as part of our environmental assessment at the potential for noise impacts as well as everything that an environmental review does. There's 18 separate categories that you look at. And there are a few places where our early analysis showed there was perhaps that potential in certain instances. And so we created measures that would avoid those impacts. Such as that separation or attenuation of sound in places where you have commercial uses where they wouldn't be today.
And 15 feet, what benchmark was that derived from?
I'd have to look at the details of the environmental review.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, but isn't there also a fire code standard that builds in additional barriers between residential and non-residential uses?
Well, that's
Which like act as a sound dampening.
That's right, but what the analysis showed is that existing fire code was insufficient. And so this goes above and beyond that code.
So I really respect and the fact that zoning probably needs to be resilient as much as everything else needs to be resilient, and perhaps uses are changing as generations are changing and all the rest of that. Going back to the 22 million square feet of vacant commercial space, what is preventing one of these property owners from going before the BZA, making their case of hardship and onerous, putting the onerous onto the actual owner and requesting some sort of exception or rather than changing zoning across the entire city? Isn't that what the BZA is for? The
BSA does not typically affect.
Forgive me, I'm
use.
spent a lot of time in zoning in DC,
Lots
so yeah.
of acronyms, totally fine.
okay.
Board of Standards and Appeals for
Yeah.
those who don't speak this language day in, day out. There are discretionary waivers for some instances, for some businesses. It is far from uniform. And it doesn't affect use in the majority of cases. There are some instances where you can introduce a new use that's not allowed as a right, but in the vast majority of cases, there's no path whatsoever. So take something like experiential retail, we keep on going back to it, because I think it's really important to understand for this district. The zoning in 1961 had a very narrow defined set of what constituted an amusement. It could be a tennis court, or it could be a freak show. It's a defined term in our zoning today that's located in Coney Island. Dodgem scooters, another defined term in our zoning today. And there's very little middle ground. There are things like bowling alleys, there are things like movie theaters that are in between, but zoning could not contemplate the way that our economy has evolved over 60 years. And so if you are, I'm gonna go back to axe throwing because you brought it up, but if you are axe throwing, zoning is very unclear that you can locate anywhere other than an industrial area. Because you can have a wide range of amusement uses in our industrial areas or in Coney Island, and that's why you go over to Williamsburg and you see that use, because it's allowed. Here, a lot less clear, you don't see it. And you don't see a whole wide range of uses, there's no path for them with the BSA and otherwise, because the zoning doesn't define it. So you could appeal to DOB, you could try and get them to clarify that the zoning might allow you if you're primarily a bar, but maybe you have a little bit of axe throwing, accessory use, so that's one path. Another path is to say that, I don't know, maybe I'm in fact a bowling alley because I'm a use that's pretty similar to a bowling alley. Well, you start to stretch the imagination pretty soon from that point. So clearly the zoning needed to be updated in order to recognize how businesses have changed. There are not existing pathways, discretionary or otherwise, in most cases to do that. And so this proposal addresses and modernizes the zoning.
So like the hubs that we're talking about too, that, I mean, for all we know, they're gonna be obsolete in 10 years because Amazon's suddenly doing everything from drone and we need those rooftops for hubs.
And I think Josh said it well earlier, we don't have a crystal ball.
Right.
The zoning is full of uses that are not really used today. Not a lot of typewriter repair you see going around the city, and yet it's a defined use. That may be possible with some of the uses we're defining here. Some of the ways that we're trying to anticipate future change, things like NAICS, where the federal government will update these uses every 5 years. The zoning itself is tied to the 2022 NAICS, but the feds provide a crosswalk to future versions. So in 2027, 2032, there will be new industries that will be defined. And DOB and us and you all will have a better sense of what might be allowed. It doesn't wholesale address your question.
So you're telling me though, one of these large floor plate buildings that's commercially zoned and vacant, top to bottom, if I were the owner, I can't go to the BSA and say, hey, I would like to put an experiential retail in this building. Can I get a zoning?
The short answer is it depends, but in many cases, no. And I would actually defer to Josh to give some more color.
And you guys are the experts. I'm not gonna dive into the zoning text. I don't know this well enough to speak to that, but I think the response to that is, in New York City, if you have enough money, the right lobbyists and the right land use attorneys, you can get a lot done. But again, it's a regulatory impediment, right? And if you're a small business trying to figure out how to do something creatively, that's more cost and it's more time and it's more hurdle to get that done, right? As opposed to having a simpler as of right regulatory regime that gives you that flexibility going into that, right? And then certainly on the way to individual uses, all of those are legitimate conversations to have about what's appropriate for the community, but I think from our perspective, having that more flexible, broader framework will allow a little bit more creativity as right is going to be helpful for small businesses trying to get into that space. And I think about it more from the tenant's perspective than from the landlord's perspective about how you're getting into that space. If that makes sense.
Speaking of one of those specific uses, and speaking of PSA special permits, forgive the pun, but shifting gears, what is the logic behind light motor vehicle repair and maintenance shops in C5? And as I'm looking at this map, this is particularly the financial district.
Yeah.
And as well as C6 and, Tribeca and the Civic Center area, but particularly in the financial district where you have challenging streets to begin with, you shouldn't have as many cars. But when there's the zoning for carbon neutrality to try to reduce the carbon footprint, when you have congestion pricing, when we're trying to reduce the amount of cars, why the hell are we asking for more car use types of service spots down here?
It's a great question. And so the impetus for actually this particular proposal in C5 districts is in part response to what we've heard from bids a little bit further north than you in other C5 districts, where today, if you're in certain parts of the town, you can locate, let's say, an unnamed electric vehicle company, both dealership and repair shop in one, which is the direction the industry is moving in, where you do all of that in-house because there's more electronics and you can specialized. And what we've heard is that zoning, if you want to have an electric vehicle, precludes that. Now, this is discretionary. It is not as of right in places where it's newly allowed. So I want to be clear on that it would go through a discretionary process, particularly for the siting concerns. And this is true a lot outside of Manhattan, where you have vehicle repair that spills out into sidewalks and streets and petting pedestrians. And so in outer boroughs, this proposal is designed to address that concern. In C5 districts in Lower Manhattan, it also has the effect of compelling that use to be completely enclosed within the zoning law. And we see that happening in other cities. We also see that happening in parts of Midtown where it's allowed today. Far west side of Midtown, where you see dealerships increasingly completely enclosed. Ezra, if you're still on, I don't know if you want to say more about the direction that electric vehicle repair is going in, but.
But wait, I don't think you can put too fine a point on what you just said, which is that, if I'm hearing this right, that in places like Lower Manhattan, as opposed to the outer boroughs, while the use may be the same, there's additional rules that require that it be completely within the envelope of the building, that there not be spillover onto the streets, that there not be parking on the sidewalks for cars that are about to be repaired, electric or otherwise. I mean, the photo you show for goal 3, action number 13 is exactly the problem I would worry about.
Exactly.
Right?
And it's exactly the problem that this is seeking to address by having findings with the special permit that stipulate that it cannot induce traffic and congestion on neighboring streets.
Traffic and congestion being one thing, but what about, I see cars being repaired, like literally on the sidewalk in this photo. Is that prevented by the text as opposed to Lower Manhattan?
As a condition of that use being allowed,
right,
the applicant would have to show and prove to the BSA that they are meeting the findings that that activity is happening within the zoning law. And in Lower Manhattan, that doesn't.
And sorry for the dumb question, but zoning lot means, does that mean the envelope of the building or no?
That means the envelope of the building and not the sidewalk.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry, I end up speaking zoning and don't realize when I'm speaking zoning. and
Years
not-
in, I should be able to pick up on it, or at least.
Yeah, sidewalk,
A little bit.
DOT, zoning lot, city planning in most cases.
Okay.
Can you give one other use group, a touch out, nightclubs,
Yeah.
nightlife,
Sorry, we didn't.
special events is a huge concern in Lower Manhattan from from Canal Street all the way down. I don't have an area in Community Board 1 that has not had conversation and dialogue with quality of life about traffic, noise, sound, smoke.
Yeah.
So I want to hear more about the expansion and the limiting of restrictions on those use groups.
If you could just add, I thought earlier you had said that maybe I got this wrong, that there's a demand for more amusement. Said, what is that based on? Is that something in Lower Manhattan? Is that citywide? And how did you assess that?
It's in fact, it's not just citywide, it's nationwide that you see an expansion, and there are research studies from firms that do leasing of space that show a decline in brick and mortar retail, a rise in services, so things like food and beverage, things like local services like dry cleaning, but also a rise in things that sort of fit this gray area of they might be an entertainment use, they might be an amusement use, they might be a recreation use, but the through thread is they're experiential. And so you see this in market studies, you see this show up in federal government reports on business types and employment. And what you also see, and you can experience this, you go just across the border to Westchester or across the river in New Jersey, you'll see things like skydiving. You'll see things like, to pick a slightly antiquated example, medieval times. Where medieval times, if they wanted to, would have a very hard time locating in New York City. I'm not saying they want to. I'm unaware of them wanting to expand here, but it's very hard for them to do that because of the zoning. So you see a fundamental disconnect between where nationwide people's demand for business has shifted, and you see this locally in CB1, with what our zoning currently allows. And so this proposal brings that into line.
Yeah, it's a tough comparison. I'd love to see a study that's looking at lower Manhattan specifically and the demand for these experiential spaces. If you could, one of you guys could provide that.
Can you share, Alice? I mean, we've done some survey research at the Alliance looking at consumer preferences in the district. And I think there is a lot of validity to that. And it certainly tracks with what we're seeing, what Matt is referencing with national trends, especially with younger consumers who are increasingly spending their disposable income on travel and entertainment and services as opposed to the traditional sort of bricks and mortar that we all used to be familiar with.
Yeah, I mean, as much as you say, I
Do you have
feel
stats on
savvy if I
whether
can.
people want to travel to that, or they want to live next door to it?
We have, I mean, we have done surveying of existing residents in Lower Manhattan. And that's the feedback that we've gotten. There's an interest in more services. There's an interest in a little bit more nightlife in the neighborhood.
And not
That-
having
that's
to leave
particular, that's a-
Manhattan to go someplace.
Go somewhere else to experience it.
Well, I'd be
Desire
curious
to
to
know.
see it. It's, you know, you talk about your crystal ball and not having one, but you're planners. So you, obviously, that is your job to have that crystal.
We
ball.
try our best.
So I have to say, I was a little taken back by that. So that's your job. So assuming you're doing it, you are also part of this, looking at what you're forecasting. And so I guess it would be interesting to a community like ours to know exactly how those forecasts are being done. And I would, I would certainly find that some of this would be things I would personally want. And I find also comparisons with other states in terms of this entertainment questions. I think most people come to New York for entertainment. They're leaving New Jersey. There's just something to be said to be in New York. You don't need an experience more than being in the city. Some would argue. But I'm just curious about that particular, yes, also, I think lit us all on fire a little bit as to the idea of having, this sort of amusement district aspect to Lower Manhattan, and even seeing things like walking down Chambers Street and seeing that glorious Immigrant Bank become a ersatz museum, with whatever artist is being shown, it's not for everybody, I'll just say that. And so I'm curious where these things are being assessed. That's all. Thank you. Sorry.
I'm gonna add, I'm gonna add to Alice's also very often when we talk about nightlife, spoken about privatization of the streetscape and how what used to be a public restaurant is now a private club, is now a private dance hall, is a ticket-only venue, which does change the nature of the streetscapes. When I look at the proposals in detail and the overlay, there's an increase from 75 to 200 people in capacities. And there is the removal of the incidental dancing is now permitted in any type of a business. And so is that any type of a business anywhere, including in the residential buildings, or is that only in the commercial space?
Yeah, so a few things here, and forgive me if I don't hit on each part, feel free to repeat your questions. Nightlife today, there are 5 versions of an eating and drinking establishment with entertainment. There are 5 different versions, and in some places you can have musical entertainment. In some places you can have non-musical entertainment. These are different. So you can't have a comedy club in most places that you can have a band. And that impacts Lower Manhattan in particular, because in C5 districts, you can have today in zoning, a concert venue of up to 200-person capacity as of right in any bar or restaurant. But you can't do comedy or an open mic night in a C5 district. So you can't have a local restaurant that does many activities that you want to have a comedy night, or you want to have a poetry reading or something like that. Zoning does not allow it. And this goes back to the early days of the cabaret laws, back to the Prohibition era, and back to the Giuliani administration and the proposal and the way in which those proposals were used to shut down businesses in a discriminatory way. And so that's the basis of how zoning was used then. A few years back, the city council repealed the cabaret law, but that's only in the administrative code. Zoning still prohibits many forms of nightlife, including dancing, including a few people dancing in a bar or restaurant in many places. So you can't have a few people who want to dance in a bar, which is different than a nightlife venue where there are tickets, where there's a posted showtime and you have a DJ going in a certain place. The zoning recognizes those are different uses. And what it's saying is if you are going to have a posted showtime, you're going to have ticketed events, you have a certain set of restrictions put in place based on your size. And if you don't do that, if you have incidental dancing,
Or dancing as a common activity in a bar or restaurant.
right, if you have it as a common activity, it's no longer accessory, it's no longer incidental. And you get put into the category of entertainment venues within amusement park. So the distinction the zoning makes is if you are in a C4 to C6 district in the future, you would have no capacity limitation, but you would have existing rules on lobbies, and you would have existing rules on distance from residence district. So today, you can have a C6 district where you can have dancing, provided those lobby rules. This proposal would expand those same regulations to C5 districts as well. That's the main gist of this proposal within this district.
Can you talk about proposal 17, the rationalized waiver process? What is that?
Yeah, I spoke on this a little bit earlier, so to give you some more context. Today, Board of Standards and Appeals, City Planning Commission have various special permits, where if you're a business that wants to say, you might be limited to 10,000 square feet, if you're a clothing business, you don't have a path to go to 12,000 square feet, even if there's a space next door you want to lease. So this creates a pathway in our zoning to allow you to do that through a discretionary process. And it rationalizes it overall because some businesses today have a pathway, some don't. So this creates a pathway generally for business types that don't have it.
And so this process is already spelled out in this draft?
Yep. Yeah, it's completely spelled out. It uses the existing findings from existing special permits. And so we're not changing the findings. What we're doing is changing the business type that can apply for those discretionary processes.
Right. I'm gonna put a lid on it. Thank you tonight. We're past 9 o'clock now. Thank you guys so much, Matt. You're still hanging with us. I'm not sure. Maybe the last one.
I was just getting
Tina and Josh too. Thank you for hanging in there.
I could keep going.
Hold on. I'm just gonna adjourn the committee meeting in 1 minute, but I want to thank the presenters for being here. Again, just to recap, committee members, you'll get an email from Zach Radamora that outlines what we're gonna do next. We're gonna have specific questions filtered through the CD1 office by November 27th. We'll pose those to the Department of City Planning with an ask that we get those back well in advance of our December 11th meeting. We're gonna come back together again on the 11th. We'll go through some of those questions and answers, but we have got to come up with a resolution at that point. So start thinking about points, specific points that we want to address, where there are some proposals we like, some that we don't. We have this handy sort of checklist format that DCP has provided with this application to kind of help weave through it. And we'll have George with us to work through those as well. And I expect we'll have George's thoughts well in advance then too. So that's how we're gonna handle that going forward, okay? Everybody good?
When you could get the Governor's Island information, do you think you could send that prior to the end of the month?
I didn't catch the first part of your question.
Governor's Island.
Yeah, I'll
How these all apply to there.
defer to the Manhattan team on that, but we'll work on getting your answers as soon as we can.
Yeah, sorry, was the question prior to when would you like that info? Next meeting?
As soon as possible. Being a little flip.
And Patrick, I know it's a big lift, but I'd love to figure out how it can involve actual businesses around here in this process.
Go for it.
We'll put you on the topic for January, figure out, talk to everybody.
At least put on our website, right?
It's a lovely meeting with Josh and
Yeah.
see what kind of.
Sorry, it's happy to finish.
I mean, I will say that businesses, small and large, are part of our community board, right?
Right.
And as much as residents are, I know we think of it as like largely residential, retail, political establishment or services establishment, but businesses are invited into, feel free to engage. To the community board, I got you. I understand. Okay, before we adjourn, I just want to remind folks there is a proposed rule change with regard to the open dining NYC dining out NYC program. The comment period expires on the 20th November, so that's next Monday. Next Monday as well, 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. There's a public hearing on the program. I know this touches quality of life, it touches transportation, but it touches on, as you can see in our discussion even tonight, on land use and zoning issues. So I think it's important for folks to, who are interested in those issues to please take a look at that, consider making public comment. And anything to add to that?
When are they coming back to do the housing?
Sometime in 2024.
Spring.
Yes.
And do you know today any overlap that will happen from the housing that is impactful on the zoning stuff that's being passed with this proposal? Out of these 18 proposals, is there any overlap in any way with the next set? If you can get us answers to that.
The only thing I'm aware of off the top of my head, and it's actually, it does not impact your district, but for your context, one of the main impediments to outside of Manhattan, where you have parking requirements for residences. You have frequently a one-story commercial district. This proposal seeks to allow you to add a few additional stories of residential onto that, because one of the main barriers is those parking restrictions. But we also know that that is inhibiting the re-tenanting in those situations of commercial space in some instances. So there is a potential interaction point between the two proposals. It's meant to be complementary again, and it does not apply to your district.
Aren't you reviewing the scope for the EIS, or has that been for the affordable housing housing? That's now.
That's currently in the scoping phase, and I defer to the Manhattan team to provide more details on that one.
I can send you more information.
Well, I think everyone should know it because that's happening now, right?
I would need to confirm that.
Right, okay. This is something we should be
Yeah.
looking at.
But many of the details of the housing proposal are public for
Yeah,
what is,
yeah.
is within the scope of the environmental review.
Right.
It's currently the public comment period for the scoping for ZHO. The scoping hearing happened already. So it's, the period for public testimony be submitted as well.
Thank you all.
Great, thank you.
Nice meeting you. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you all.